years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometers have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, how are you? Monday night is Duncan Barkes in for Petri Hoskin, and this is Talk. If you're wondering where the broadcasting queen is, she was on earlier today and she's back here. That's Petri, 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. So I'm here for the next few hours, late nights with Duncan Barkes. Good to have you along, and a ton of stuff to talk over. I'm just sorting out a few technical bits here, so don't think I've got my finger stuck in my ear. I haven't. I don't normally look like this. So a lot of stuff to talk about. A little bit of political chat coming up as we talk about this growing narrative that's taking place regarding the Conservatives and Reform UK. The polls do appear to be narrowing a little bit. There's a lot of stuff that's been written about recently, all about Kemi Badenoch and how she's turning a corner politically, also about Reform UK, and whether or not at some point we might see a situation where you have a pact or a coalition between Reform and the Conservative Party. We'll be talking about that in more detail as the night time continues. We have a poll tracker by the Telegraph newspaper found that the Conservatives have overtaken Labour in the polls for the first time since Boris Johnson was in office. Who would have thought that 6 months ago? So in quite an interesting situation. Some say Badenoch's leadership is showing signs of recovery 13 months since she became the leader of the party. Now, I don't know. I don't know if you're listening and watching me at the moment and you're a Conservative Party member. Maybe you're someone who used to be a Tory who's now joined Reform UK. Maybe you have regret. Maybe you find yourself thinking, I should have stuck with Kemi. We'll talk about that as the night continues. 0344 499 1000 if you want to get in early. I want to talk about how closely should the Tories and Reform unite to beat Labour. Now, we take it as read that this Labour government, 18 months in, is quite possibly the worst government I have seen in my lifetime. And let's be honest, there have been some pretty bad shockers over the last 50 years, right? If you take it as read that this government is a bit of a shocker and you don't want to see Labour get back in, then surely there's an argument to unite the right. That's the phrase they use, unite the right. And if we unite the right, then by my reckoning, that means you're going to have the Tories and Reform UK doing some kind of deal. How would that sit with you? If you're listening or watching Talk tonight and you're a Reform UK supporter, particularly if you left the Conservatives to join Reform UK, could you see Reform do a deal with the Tories? Famously, Nigel Farage has said in the past he wants to destroy, it's a really powerful word, destroy the Conservative Party. So why would any political organisation do some kind of deal with another that wants to actually destroy them? We need to have that conversation. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Destroy is such a powerful word, isn't it? Absolutely powerful. So could there ever be some kind of coalition? Could there ever be some kind of pact between these political parties in order to ensure that this country doesn't end up with yet another Labour government? Now, you might be thinking, well, this Labour government's doing all right. And if you want to have that conversation tonight, let's have the conversation, because I challenge you to tell me one thing they've done in the last 18 months that actually is a good thing. You can text us, 87222 is the text number. Start your message with the word talk. The number 0344 499 1000. A little bit hot in our talk studio tonight, so we'll sort out the air conditioning in a few moments' time. Talking political stuff for the first part of this show. And just give me your sense on Kemi Badenoch. I wrote a piece for the Daily Express newspaper today talking about Kemi Badenoch. You can go online, you can look at it if you want. It's a really interesting situation I think she finds herself in, because when she started, things weren't great. People accused her of being invisible. People said, we haven't seen her anywhere. Where is she? Where is Kemi? And it turned out for the first part of her role as leader, she'd spent 3 or 4 months going away and sorting out the donors. And that's really important, because in politics, you do need money, right? Politics doesn't work unless there are donors propping up your political party. And I think it's fair to say, after one of the most historic defeats in the Conservative Party history, Kemi was right to go. We've got to make sure we still got people who are going to give us some cash. So she went away and she did that. And now I think, having stabilised the donor side of things, she's in a position where she's doing more media. And we've seen her pop up all over the place. And we've also seen her almost have a conversion at the ballot box, not the ballot box, the dispatch box, where she, for the last 3 months, I would say, in PMQs, Prime Minister's Questions, has really turned a corner. When she first started off, it was a little bit embarrassing, to be honest with you, embarrassing to watch. Now, it was a masterclass, and her response to the Rachel Reeves budget was just, I mean, I think one of the greatest political moments of 2025. So I think Kemi has turned a corner. We're not seeing so much, as we have done in the past, of some of her fellow politicians in the Conservative Party briefing in an anonymous way that, oh, I don't think she's going to laugh. I mean, I remember quite clearly when I was in Manchester at the Conservative Party conference. I was there in my capacity as a journalist. I was doing some work, I was doing some hosting duties. There were people who were quite openly going, I don't think she'll survive. I don't think she'll be around for much longer. We're not seeing those kind of briefings happening in the newspapers anymore. At least I don't think we are. So tell me tonight on Talk, when we talk about Kemi Badenoch, how do you rate her? Do you think she's come on in leaps and bounds? Is it still a work in progress? 0344 499 1000. We'll take your calls. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. And of course, you can WhatsApp and send a voice note as well. 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at your national rate. Let's get some perspective on this. Michael Crick is a broadcaster, writer and journalist, and he joins us on Talk. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Listen, thanks for your time tonight. I mean, there's this interesting narrative that has been developing over the last couple of days, this idea that at some point in the future there may well be some kind of pact with the Conservative Party and also Reform UK. Do you give much credence to this?
Well, certainly there are people around who like that idea. I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg has been advocating that for quite a while now. I think there are major problems with it, though. For a start, I think as things are, the Conservatives would be the junior partners in such a pact. And I think a lot of people in the party would find that very hard to accept. And generally, in coalitions, we saw it with the Liberal Democrats in David Cameron's coalition 10, 15 years ago. They tend to lose out. I mean, the Liberal Democrats, you'll recall, got absolutely hammered at the 2015 general election. I think their number of seats was reduced to 8 or something like that. And that tends to happen in Europe as well, that the junior coalition partner loses out. And I think in practical terms, the other problem is they'd have to go through the seats and say, right, we're fighting this one, you fight that one. And for all 630 odd seats on the British mainland, And that would be very difficult indeed, because although the bigwigs in principle might be willing to do that and maybe carve them up 50-50, the problem would be on the ground. Activists would always say, yeah, well, we're going to carry on fighting your seat, but we don't mind Reform fighting the seat next door to us. And not just the activists, but in particular councillors, because councillors would be keen to maintain a Conservative presence in the seat where they are a councillor, because if they say, right, Reform can fight this seat, then that weakens their chances of getting re-elected as a councillor. So that's an example of the kind of practical difficulties I think will happen. I don't think there will be a pact. I mean, there might be a sort of unofficial pact whereby they sort of understand, we'll put the effort into this seat and you put the effort into that seat, but both parties would carry on fighting all the seats under those circumstances. And you've seen that, but in the past with Labour and the Liberal Democrats, and at times the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, and I can see that happening, and that would help the right as a whole.
You make a really interesting point about the activists, because these are the people who give up their time, they give up their weekends, they're out on the knocking on doors, putting leaflets through doors, often in appalling weather. They are the backbone of any political party, right? And it's all well and good, quite possibly, political leaders, and we know this is speculation, though there is a narrative that's been developing in the last 24 hours. It's fine for political leaders of parties to say, well, we might look at this, but it's really important to get those activists on side, isn't it? They are the people who keep your organisation ticking over, and actually, without their support, you can't get it done. Yeah,
and the danger is, if you say, oh, well, we're giving up the seat where you live to Reform, we're letting them run in that seat, the activists just give up and they don't bother. They don't go and fight in a nearby seat where the Conservatives are standing. They just give up altogether, or they might even decide to join Reform in those circumstances. And so I think, and you had this problem way back 40 years ago. I mean, I was around at the time when the Social Democrats and what were then called the Liberals were in an alliance for the 1983 election. And that problem occurred then. There's so much so you basically have, 632 fights on the ground over which party fights which seat.
You also,
the Conservatives will say, well, look, in more than 300 seats, we had the sitting MP until a few years ago, until 2024. So they will say, well, we should fight more than Reform. Reform are Johnny-come-latelys. They've only got 5 MPs, and so you can understand the kind of arguments that would go on. I think there's another problem as well, and that is Farage, as you point out, which we can go on to discuss if you and his role in this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, let's spend a bit of time on Big Nige, to coin a phrase. I mean, you've written a book about this man's career and various political identities over the years. As with all politicians, he has an ego. I don't think you can be a political leader without having an ego. I mean, if you actually strip all of this down and there was to be some kind of pact or coalition, ultimately you're going to have to decide who's going to be leader, right, or who's going to be Prime Minister. Can you honestly see Nigel Farage going, go on, Kemi, you have a go?
No, he's not that kind of person. You know him well. You've worked for him. And
well, he was a client of a company of mine, I'm just making that point. That's interesting because he is a man who's very strident in his views and in his beliefs, and I don't think he would be able to work for anyone else.
I mean, he does have a Conservative background, of course. I mean, when he was at school, there's been a lot about his school career, and let's not go into the details of the bullying and so on. But he did join the Conservative Party as a schoolboy. He was inspired by big name Conservatives from that era: Enoch Powell, Keith Joseph, and Margaret Thatcher. And he joined the party, and there was much later than that. And this is a story I tell in my book. And Farage partly denies it, but I'm 100% convinced it's true. He, in 2004, when he was leader of the UKIP group in the European Parliament, he actually went along. He tried to become a Conservative MP for Tunbridge Wells, and he had a secret meeting at a house in Surrey And he got nowhere. They said, "Oh, well, you have to go through all the, interviews and we'll have to, training and all of that, and then we might put you on the list." And they made it was made clear it wasn't. He couldn't just have a seat just like that.
It wasn't going to be a shoo-in, no.
No. And he's always had, he says, he'd like to take over the Conservative Party.
Well, he says he wants to destroy it, doesn't he?
Yes,
Which, I mean, doesn't bode well if you're looking to end up having some kind of pact, or you need to have a pact with another political party that you've gone on the record several times, along with your chums in Reform UK, to say we're going to destroy you.
And not only that, he tends to destroy or fall out with virtually everybody he works with. I mean, he is Stalinist in that regard, or he just, anybody who's threatening in any way as a rival.
I think it's fair to say his political journey is littered with corpses. I mean, most recently Rupert Lowe and people like Ben Habib. You can go further back. Give me your take on this, Michael, because I'm really interested in this perception. I know Reform UK supporters who see Reform as the last, if you like, political hope of this country. Okay, they believe that Britain is broken, so they're of the view which is, Reform is the only answer, and they utterly, for whatever reason, despise the Conservative Party. Then what's your view on the fact that over the last year or so, we're seeing more and more Conservative politicians who are part of the last government, some might be unkind and say failed Conservative MPs, who have now rocked up at Reform UK and have nailed their colours to the Reform mast, and some say to me, do you know what, I don't like this, because Reform UK ends up almost becoming a care home for failed Conservative MPs. That is a problem, isn't it?
It's a huge problem. And if you look at the Conservatives who've defected, they are pretty low caliber, most of them. I mean, Danny Kruger, I think, is one big exception, and he's been put in charge of policy and strategy for if they do come into government.
He's got a big brain, that bloke. There's a big brain going on there.
He certainly does. Yeah. But although he's not everybody's cup of tea, but then who is? But some of them, some of the people who've defected, if I was Reform, I'd keep very quietly about them. And I think they've got to put controls on this immigration, as one might say, and what they desperately need, frankly, my view is they need a few Labour defections. The trouble is, it's very difficult to think of who amongst the parliamentary party anyway might defect from Labour. Now, of course, just look at in terms of calibre. I think I can only think of. I suppose you've got what's his name, the guy from Lancashire. My brain's gone. But and also David Jones. They both defected. But some of those who were ministers were very junior ministers, and it's very difficult to see where Reform actually puts who would be in a Reform cabinet. But well,
that's their Achilles heel, isn't it? And I think
well, one of them. They've got several.
But I mean, the idea that actually they don't have the experience, so they will argue, well, that's why we need people like Nadine Dorries, that's why we need people like Jake Berry, that's why we need people like Jonathan
That's who
Goss.
I meant.
On side, because at least they've got some experience of government. But you don't think that's enough?
Well, I don't think it's enough, because they need people of. Frankly, they need big brains. This is a criticism I make at the Starmer government as well, by the way. You need some really clever people to do the really, really difficult stuff: foreign policy, the economy, defence.
Let's be honest, Michael, it's the stuff that's not sexy, is it? Because you don't get the limelight. You need people who are prepared to put in the legwork and do the mental hard graft. And actually, that can be, for some people, quite tedious.
And Farage doesn't really like to get his. Farage notoriously used to say that he'd never actually read his own party's manifesto when he was leader of the UKIP. He makes policy up on the hoof. And there was a very interesting article in the Times today by Trevor Phillips, and Trevor's views are close to mine on this. And he said in fact, they're spot on with mine. He says that Farage is terrified of being Prime Minister. He wants to be elected Prime Minister, but actually doing the job, he's terrified of him. And I think that is true. And I run this idea past various people in Reform quietly behind the scenes, and they've sort of confirmed that. And Trevor Phillips says that actually Farage would love to be president of the UK, but not Prime Minister. A bit like being president of France, but not Prime Minister, or president of the United States and somebody else carrying out the policies. But Of course, we don't have a system like that. And
No.
being Prime Minister is a really, I mean, Boris Johnson once confided to one of his closest advisors. He put his head in his hands like that, Boris Johnson like, and said, you know, I just didn't realize how hard it is to be Prime Minister. And that is probably true, you know, more true today than it has been at any point since the war. That is not Farage. Now,
you can make the parallels, can't you? There are similarities between Boris and also Nigel Farage in terms of personalities. Before I let you go, just a quick thought, please, about Kemi Badenoch. I mean, I was making the point earlier. It seems to me she's turned a corner as leader of the Conservative Party. Do you think she's, for now, safe compared to maybe some other people in the party who want to see her gone?
I do. I take a very unfashionable view. I think that Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer will be both in their current jobs at the end of next year, so in 12 months' time. I'm less certain of it in the case of Starmer than I am in the case of Badenoch. She certainly, I think the turning point really was her conference speech, which I thought was a great speach.
Good speech.
I'm normally very critical of conference speeches, but it excelled in so many different ways. It was funny. It was well crafted. It had a new policy, you know, for instance, the promise to abolish stamp duty.
Yeah.
It
actually had some proper Conservative policies in there, and I think a lot of people, and I was there in Manchester when she gave the speech, thought, my word, where has this version of the Conservative Party been for the last couple of years? Because there was some proper red meat there to the Tory faithful.
And her main problem is she lacks energy, I think. I mean, I sort of don't really mean that personally. It's just that her leadership lacks energy. And Robert Jenrick, her sort of rival for the job, both in the election in which she got elected and you know, clearly wants the job right now, he does display a lot of energy and imagination as a campaigner. And she needs a few better people around her to help her with that. But she has come on a lot, I think, since in the latter half of this year.
I think so. And I mean, do you think, I mean, for me, I find it, just as an observer, quite bizarre that you have people in the Conservative Party who are agitating for her to be removed only a few months into her brand new gig, if you like. These people who actually think it's a good look to the British public to change leader yet again. I mean, it's almost like, have you taken leave of your senses? People look at your party at the moment and just go 14 years, chaos, particularly the last few years of those 14 years, and here you are banging on about the fact you want to change leader again. It defies belief, and I think if they did change leader, that party would honestly be in the extinction zone.
I think it would be damaging, and I think you've got to look back at a bit of history. I mean, Margaret Thatcher wasn't thought to be doing very well when she was in opposition.
True.
Edward Heath, I'm writing a book about Edward Heath, who was leader of the Conservatives in the 60s and was elected Prime Minister in 1970. For most of his time in opposition, he was thought to be doing really badly, considered a really bad performer. She's done well at Prime Minister's questions, as you said earlier, in the last few weeks, and that's tremendous, I think, her performance is. However, a word of caution here, and I'm sure you've heard this before. William Hague, notoriously or famously, when he was leader in the first 4 years of Tony Blair, 1997 to 2001, he used to beat Hague at Prime Minister's question almost every week. And all the MPs loved it. And what happened at the next election? The Conservatives got virtually the same number of seats that they had at the first time round. So performances at Prime Minister's questions cheer up the faithful, cheer up the MPs who are there. But they don't necessarily have an impact on the country. And that's what she's got to do now. It's difficult for her. She's got a young family. And you know, a lot of political leaders don't have families, and that makes life a lot easier for them. But I think the Conservatives should give her more time. And I'm not sure that Jenrick's the answer. He strikes me as a bit of a political opportunist, frankly. I mean, when I first met Jenrick, I thought he was a left-wing Conservative. That was at the time of the Newark by-election.
Some people have made the observation he's had quite a miraculous conversion. Listen, Michael, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us on Talk. That's Michael Crick, broadcaster, writer and journalist. Your thoughts tonight here on Talk. We'll look at this in more detail after midnight. 034 0344 499 1000. Calls a chance at your national rate. Let's talk about you as someone who maybe has become so disenfranchised with the Conservative Party, you've decided to join Reform. If that is you, what do you make of what we've been hearing over the last 24 hours, that there could be some movement, particularly with the Conservatives, on the idea of doing a pact or coming to some kind of agreement with Reform UK if it means keeping Keir Starmer and his chums out of Downing Street for a second term? Could you swallow that? 87222 is the text number. Start your message with the word talk. You can send WhatsApps, you can send voice notes, and you can call 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Monday night, this is Duncan Barkes in for Petri Hoskin. Thankfully, a little bit more cooler in our Talk studio than it was 20 minutes ago. Listen, I'm here through until 1 in the morning. Thank you for your messages and calls so far, talking about the Conservative Party, talking about Reform UK. Could there be a pact? Should there be a pact? Is that the answer to keeping Labour out of Downing Street for another term of office? 0344 499 1000. And you heard me talk to Michael Crick earlier. Give me your assessment of Kemi Badenoch, right? She's been in the job now for, well, just around a year. Do you think she's done a good job so far? Has she turned a corner? When you see her in Prime Minister's Questions, when you saw her do quite a big takedown, and I use those words specifically, of Rachel Reeves after the budget, do you think, actually, she's come on in leaps and bounds? And, I think maybe Kemi is the answer. WhatsApp, a voice note, call me 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. Now, do you fancy some cash? I think we all need cash with the cost of living, where it's at, the credit card bills in the new year. I have an idea. Here at Talk, we're going to welcome in 2026 by giving away a massive £26,000. 26 grand could be yours. What better way to kick off a brand new year with a chance to win some serious cash? £26,000. It is our biggest, and I mean our biggest New Year cash giveaway ever, and it could be yours. You're going to like this. It's 26k for 2026. So this is how you enter. For your chance to win, you text the word talk to 83338. So that's the word talk to 83338. 33338. Text cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or you can call the following number 0343 423 9761. I'll say that again. 0343 423 9761. Lines close at 12 p.m. on the 9th of January 2026. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings, so make sure you do answer it. You need to be in the UK and over the age of 18. This is a network promotion. Full terms and conditions available at talksport.com/win. So for your chance to win, text the word TALK to 83338. Do it now and good luck. Monday night, I'm Duncan Barkes in for Petri Hoskin. This is Talk. We'll do some of your messages as they come in as the show continues, talking about the Conservative Party and Reform UK. But I want to also focus on something else regarding road safety. And also, when we talk about bad driving, or indeed bad drivers, who, for you, are the worst culprits? Let me explain in a little bit more detail. Experts from GEM Motoring Assist are calling on the government to force drivers over the age of 70, which could be you, to take a professional eye test every 3 years in order to keep their licence. So the idea is you hit 70 years of age, and then every 3 years it must be compulsory, have your eyes checked to make sure that you can still see properly behind the wheel. Ministers are said to be considering banning elderly drivers. That's a really interesting word, isn't it? Elderly. Are we still allowed to use elderly? Is that not a little bit too nasty? Elderly? Older drivers? I don't know. Elderly drivers, if they fail compulsory eye tests, tougher penalties for uninsured drivers and those who fail to wear a seatbelt. You see, I remember when the seatbelt law came in, which was in the early 1980s, because I'm that old, and it's clunk, click, every trip. Yeah. We're going to look at this in more detail. We're going to talk to Maria McCarthy, motoring journalist and author. But get your messages in quick if you want to get involved in this. 87222 on the text. Start your message with the word TALK. 0344 499 1000. Who are the worst drivers? And how should the government change driving licence rules for those over the age of 70? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Monday night, this is Duncan Barkes. Good to have you along. Talking road safety for this chunk of the show. I bet you have seen some shocking driving wherever you might be listening or watching Talk at the moment. Get in contact with me tonight and tell me who are the worst drivers. I've got a few I could list. There does seem to be a common denominator. Anyone who drives an Audi seems unable to know what the highway code actually is. And don't get me started on people who drive Teslas. I don't know what happens when people sit behind the wheel of a Tesla. It's like they lose any ability to think for themselves because it's driven by an iPad, right? Anyway, who are the worst drivers? And also, and I've got to be a little bit careful with this, I don't want to demonise those over the age of 70, or as it says here, the elderly. I don't want to have a pop at OAPs, but the reason we're talking about this is there's quite a concerted campaign to make it mandatory for people over the age of 70 to have eye tests every 3 years in order to keep their licence. Now, if you're in that age bracket, 70 plus, what's your reaction to this? Would you be offended by that? Would you go, well, that makes sense because the older we get as human beings, things stop working? Look, I'm in my mid-50s, all right, and most of me stopped working. I haven't even got to 70 yet. So you know what it's like. If you are a little bit older, your eyesight's not too good, your reaction times can't be as good as they used to be. It stands to reason because you're a little bit older. But do you listen to what I'm saying and find yourself thinking this is just having a pop at older people, which is unfair? Or do you concede that if you are someone who is 70 plus, you're not going to be as safe behind the wheel as maybe you were 20 years ago? I don't think that's a particularly offensive observation, is it? 0344 499 1000 for your WhatsApps, your calls, and if you want to have a chat tonight, let's have that conversation. You know, some good old-fashioned social media. A chat. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. Who are the worst drivers? Well, we'll take it as read that Audi and Tesla drivers are already on the list. And actually, to be a little bit more serious, how should the government change driving licence rules for those over the age of 70? Because that's what this campaign is about. Let's get a view on this. Maria McCarthy is a motoring journalist and an author. She joins us. Maria, hello.
Hello.
Hello. Listen, thank you for your time. Your initial reaction to this tonight?
I think it's a brilliant idea to test not just drivers over the age of 70, but all of us. You know, I mean, basically you're there, you take your driving test, you know, you read that number plate, and that's it. You know, you never have your eyesight tested again. And I think, you know, people start needing glasses in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and also people need different types of glasses. Like I, for example, these are cheap, ready readers, but I need driving glasses. And I went to the optician, you know, to see if I need, you know, proper reading glasses. And they said, well, no, you don't. You can still get them from the supermarket. But actually, you do need driving glasses. And I had no idea. But then when I put them on, I could feel things just sharpening that little bit. It wasn't a big difference, but it was a difference. And so I think that a lot of people out there of all ages are going around thinking that their eyesight is fine. When in actual fact, you know, there is room for improvement.
Yeah, and it stands to reason, doesn't it? As we get older, and I hesitate to use the word decay, but we are decaying, right? Our bodies do decay. Our eyesight's not as good as it used to be. Other faculties are not as sharp as they used to be. There is quite a solid argument here to say, do you know what? The right and proper thing to do is to have your eyes tested regularly to make sure they're 100%.
Exactly. And that just, as I say, that just goes for all of us. And in terms of other age-related things, I think that over the age of 70, it would be a good idea to go to a driving doctor, not your GP, because you've got a personal relationship with them, but somebody who can, you know, test your reflexes, you know, have a little sort of like do little tests to see if any sort of dementia or any sort of mental deterioration is creeping in. You know, look at your ability to sort of turn and twist, like you'd have to, you know, check the mirrors or whatever, and just to like give you an overall health check. I'm not into the idea of you know, over 70s retaking their driving tests, because that's going to cost them a fortune. I mean, who's going to have like the money to have all those lessons? Then of course you can get a driving test anyway. No.
But forgive me for interrupting. Isn't that the quick and easiest way of doing it? To make sure that those who are older are 100% safe behind the wheel is to have them retaking their driving test.
Well, it certainly isn't easy, because I think an awful lot of older people, what they do is they sort of like, they self-regulate. You know, they sort of, you know, they don't do the drives that they used to do because they know that they're, you know, not as good as they were. So they might drive locally. but they don't necessarily drive on the motorway and so forth. But if they had to retake their test at 70, that's going to cost them an awful lot of money in terms of lessons. Not as much as if you did it from the start, obviously, but it will cost them. Then, of course, are they even going to be able to get a test? We've got to have driving test waiting lists going up until 2027 now.
Yeah, you make a good point. The moment I asked that question, I found myself thinking, actually, do you know what? It wouldn't work, would it? Because we have this backlog at the moment for people wanting tests. It's a sensitive issue, this, isn't it? Because I'm just very aware, talking about it, there is a danger that we end up demonising older people as drivers, and we work on the basis that they're not safe. Whenever I've talked about this on the radio or indeed elsewhere before, people are very quick to point out that actually older drivers are not the problem. It's the younger drivers who take unnecessary risks.
Yes, that's right. I think what there is there's an acknowledged sort of curve, which is the younger drivers, they are the best drivers in the sense that, you know, their reactions are great, you know, they're fresh from their lessons. But what they suffer from is overconfidence. It's what I call Battle of Britain syndrome. Just mean they're really, really brilliant, but you know, you wouldn't go up in a plane like that when you're sort of 52 because you've got more sense. But at 21, you think it's all going to be fine. So you've got that, and then in midlife, people tend to sort of like, you know, get better and better because they've got more experience and so forth. And then in terms of older age, there comes a tipping point. I think it's around about 80. Yeah. When accidents start to sort of go up again.
Yeah, and we should also consider that for a lot of older people, a car is a necessity. It's a lifeline, isn't it? Particularly if they live in a rural part of the United Kingdom. They need it. They need to get about. You know, if public transport isn't that good, I mean, bus services in many parts of the UK, particularly at night in the countryside, are just non-existent. They do rely on their cars.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot to be said for, like, you know, really, you know, there's all sorts of reasons why we should have better public transport, but that's one of them, you know, is so that, you know, older people sort of like aren't necessarily, you know, as reliant on their cars as they currently are.
I'm touched by something you said about this idea of a driving doctor, which I think is which is a great term, actually. I mean, that's a good business plan for someone, isn't it? And I also found myself thinking, listening to you, you know, because here I am throwing out some questions and stuff and just going, wow, why don't we just make people over the age of 70 retake their driving test every few years? Because that's got to be the easiest way to make it safer for all of us on the roads. But you see, I passed my driving test in 1990. Shudder, right? The theory test didn't even exist in 1990. And now, if I had to retake my practical and my theory test, if I'm going to be an honest late night broadcaster here at Talk and put up my hand, I'm not entirely sure I would pass, would you?
Well, it's interesting you should say 1990 because that was actually quite a significant date, because in 1991, reverse parking became part of the driving test.
Yeah, didn't have any of that. No problem.
Point,
I can't.
Nobody had to learn it. You did not have to do a parallel park on your driving test. No. And then afterwards you did. And I bet that you were like thinking, I've got to pass now before that gets brought in.
Yeah, yeah. So ultimately, your take on this idea, because the government are being pressured by GEM motoring assist to force drivers over the age of 70 to take a professional eye test. There's a wider debate about making roads safer and how we do it, particularly for older drivers. In an ideal world, apart from your brilliant idea of a driving doctor, what should happen? What should the government implement?
Well, I think we should have the driving doctor. I think there should be more sort of information about how to like move on from your car. You know, I think a lot of people, they sort of say, I've got to have my car, I've got to have my car. In actual fact, you know, you might be able to like, you know, have taxis more. You know, when you actually look at the cost of running a car, you know, for some people a taxi might be the answer. You know, so I think that, you know, there's the idea of like, you know, looking at different options. You know, so and I think, you know, if self-driving cars come in, I mean, that will just be...
Well, hang on a sec. This is an entirely different topic. A self-driving car. I mean, as a motoring journalist, do you think that's the future?
I think that we keep on saying, oh, we're going to have them, we're going to have them, they're going to happen like next year, they're going to happen the year after. But to be honest with you, they rely on sensors and you know, radar and so forth to pick up things like road signs and you know, both ones that are sort of like on signs and ones that are on the road. And I was talking to somebody from the Road Signs Association, said this absolutely isn't going to work until we get that infrastructure better, because as a normal like human person, you can sort of spot something, but a tree's hanging over, but you know, computers can't tell that. So I just don't think that our environment isn't sufficiently sci-fi, for a fully self-driving car to be able to work yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very suspicious of the whole idea because, I mean, I use the Arun Valley line on the train to get from Chichester into London Victoria, and the Wi-Fi hardly works. And if you can't crack that, how on earth can we end up in a situation where we can have driverless cars relying on technology that's reliant 24/7?
Exactly. We're a long way off, and we keep on being told it's just around the corner. And people keep on calling things self-driving cars when they're not. A real self-driving car is when you get in, it's a little pod, you have no more responsibility for it than you would on the train, and off it goes. Just takes you wherever.
I'm with you. A real self-driving car is one that I can get into like a pod after I've had a couple of pints at the pub and a steak and kidney pie, and I can actually get home and not take any responsibility for the machinery that I'm inside. Maria, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for joining us on Talk. That's Maria McCarthy, motoring journalist and author. I'm being a little bit flippant here, but you wouldn't expect me to do anything else. Let's talk about who are the worst drivers. I want to get some of your messages on this. 87222 is the text number. Start your message with the word talk. Of course, you can voice note, you can WhatsApp, you can call 0344 499 1000. This is Johanna from Salisbury. Says, Duncan, the worst drivers are new drivers that take on more than they are ready for. A guy 2 weeks ago, after passing a car licence driving a large scaffold lorry, nearly killed my son-in-law in his 50s on a motorbike. It's all down to inexperience. You should have an eye test every 3 years after the age of 45. What kind of person doesn't? I'm 66 and I wear glasses. Joanna, sorry to hear about that experience, but thank you very much for your message. Any thoughts about how the government should change driving licence rules for the over 70s? I'd welcome your thoughts on that. And also, who are the worst drivers? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Late Monday night, Duncan Barkes in for Petri Hoskin. This is Talk. One of the sad stories that we heard about late mid-afternoon earlier was the death of the singer-songwriter Chris Rea. Now, possibly, you're like me. You grew up with his music throughout the 1970s, 1980s and 1990s. Some great tracks. Let's just take a little musical refresher of some of his great music.
I can hear your heartbeat. Oh, I can hear your heartbeat. Oh, if you think it's over, it's just begun. Deeper
I mean, an outstanding musical legacy, and for me, some great tracks in there. One of the ones I love is Stainsby Girls. I think it's fantastic. I could bore you, and I might do later, with how much I love that track. Just the way he sings it, then the guitar comes in, there's a little bit of a guitar, then it kicks in massively. Let's talk about the life of Chris Rea. Joining us is Beverly Lyons, entertainment reporter. Hello, Bev.
Hi there. Such sad news, isn't it, today? I mean, what a legend, and very timely, of course, driving home for Christmas. Yeah. Well, he's up there now. He's driven home, as some are saying. And so sad, and I know that you're such a big fan, as are many. Well,
many are, and I mean, you know, there's a couple of things to note here. I mean, he really was the pride of Middlesbrough, right? You know, I mean, a great Northeast name, a Northeast singer-songwriter, an amazing musical legacy and a back catalogue. And the story is just fantastic, hit after hit after hit. And you rightly make the point, you know, sadly, we learn about his death just a few days before Christmas. But in some cases, and I say this with an element of sensitivity, not a massive surprise, because his health hasn't been good for a number of years, has it?
That's right. Since his 30s, he was actually hampered, firstly by stomach ulcers, and then that turned, of course, to pancreatic cancer, and then he had an operation. And then I think he was on about 34 pills and about 7 injections a day. And he talked about it rather extensively, about how he was hampered by ill health, but he still was trying to make a go of it. And I think it made him appreciate life even more, the fact that he had to endure that illness. But of course, success didn't come so easy to him initially, did it? Because he had obviously success in the 70s early on, I'm sure you know with what songs, but then it sort of slowed down a little bit. And then, you know, before driving home for Christmas, he was wondering what was really going to happen, and he was working in Abbey Road Studios. And luckily he went home for Christmas and a big cheque appeared, a royalty cheque. I think it was from the Road to Hell. And he managed to make driving home for Christmas, which of course was something that he saw when he was on his way home for Christmas. He was stuck in traffic. He used to look out the window at the driver next to him. Yeah. That's all reflected in the lyrics of the song. But, you know, as I said, it was Fool If You Think It's Over in 1978 that really got him the huge success around the world. In the US, and he never actually toured there.
I never knew that. That's really interesting.
That's what I believe. Yeah.
Well, what are people saying tonight in terms of the musical world?
Oh, well, everybody and anybody's been paying tribute to him because, you know, he is such a legend. And as I say, he marks a generation. His was also, his singing was, it was so chilled out, wasn't it? Was he a rock star? I'm not sure.
Do you know, let me interrupt you for a second, because you've asked a brilliant question there. We live in a world where we have to pigeonhole people, right? Or put labels on people. Sadly, that's the 21st century. How musically do you define Chris Rea? Because over the last few hours, I've seen him listed and referenced as a rock singer, and you can kind of go, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I mean, he plays a guitar, right? So, you know, he's a rock singer. Yes. I've also seen him referenced as a blues singer, and some of his album tracks are very bluesy. And I've also seen him referenced in a few places as a folk singer. Now, if you take away the stereotype of what a folk singer is, and I don't want to upset any folkies listening or watching Talk tonight, but, you know, we're not talking about people with big beards and jumpers playing a banjo talking about the mine closing in 1962 or whatever, right? I don't want to upset people, but we're not talking about that. But when you talk about local folk music, you can make the argument that Chris Rea's style and some of the songs he recorded are actually quite folky, aren't they?
Absolutely. And the funny thing was, you know, at first he was labelled very much as a piano artist. You know, and he did duet, of course, with Elton John at one point. But as you say, the guitar and the blues were his love. And he returned to that latterly, of course, with the Horner, you know, the bluesy Horner sound. That was his favourite guitar, and that was the sounds that he really loved to go with. But as you say, he was an everyman, and he was very much a man's man, I think, as well. You know, very much admired by males, and by females as well. But he was serious, and he was self-taught. You know that he wanted to be a journalist at one point too.
I didn't know that, and it wasn't until I was reading various obituaries earlier that, apart from being born in Middlesbrough in 1951 to an Italian father and an Irish mother, the family were known locally for Camillo's ice cream factory and cafes, and he worked in the ice cream factory. And apparently, according to one report, he actually took his driving test in an ice cream van.
Yeah, I believe that, and I'm sure that he probably composed some of his greatest hits also whilst, making ice cream, whilst doing ice cream. So he was very famously doing that, and the Irish roots as well. So it was a lovely mix of different things. But as I say, he was very down to earth, self-deprecating, and just a sort of real human being. And I think very much underestimated, albeit he did sell more than 40 million albums in his lifetime. I mean, that's a heck of a number. And you just have to go onto YouTube and see the huge numbers that his songs were hitting. I think he did about 26 different albums in the course of his lifetime, some like 25 studio albums.
Yeah, and you make a really interesting point there compared to the world of, dare I say it, pop and rock that we exist in now, where everything's about Instagram and everything's about, having an image that is paramount and is very shiny, some might say carefully created and a little bit fake. Compare that to Chris Rea. He was always very real, wasn't he? And if you watch any of the interviews, and I have done over the last hour and a half or so, or whatever, he's really natural in the interviews. There's no pretense going on. There's no I am the big man. And you see, I put that down to his northeast of England roots. That's what I think that's about.
Absolutely. He was, as I say, and even in his style of singing, you can see that as well. There was a very, what some would say, it sounded very easy when he sang. He wasn't really belting. He was just being, he was just singing it as you would. And that made it easy for people to sing along because it was so casual, but it was just so catchy as well. Very talented and will be very sadly missed.
He will be sadly missed, and I think he's probably, and someone will prove me wrong, when you say things like this on a platform like Talk, and if you get it wrong, people are very quick to point out, but I suspect he's probably one of a very few recording artists who have actually written a song about the hell of being stuck on the M25 in the traffic jam, because I can't think of any other songs that have been written about the M25 unless you can.
You're absolutely right. Well, I'm not too sure, but you can leave that one with me for another time. But you know what? He also was in a film. I don't know if you know this, but he was with Felicity Kendall and Joanna Lumley. And I think it was Bob Hoskins and John Cleese in, I think it was Parting Shots comedy as well. So he was an actor as well. So he did a heck of a lot throughout his career. And of course, he was into motor racing as well. Yeah. And then he also wrote a song for Jeremy Corbyn. So he got a wee bit political at one point too. It was quite an interesting career. He ticked all the boxes that you might want to tick. Just entering all these different arenas in the course of his life, and albeit he was tackling this illness all throughout his life.
Beverly, a pleasure to talk to you tonight. Thank you for your time. That's Beverly Lyons, entertainment reporter. Here's a little challenge to you then. I've set myself up for something here. I've just said, right, I reckon The Road to Hell by Chris Rea, one of his greatest songs, goes without saying, is probably the only song, if not one of a handful of songs written about the M25, right? If I've got that wrong, prove me wrong. 87222 is the text number. Start your message with the word talk. 0344 499 1000. You can call, you can WhatsApp, you can send a voice note. I like a bit of music chat, all right? And we're talking tonight about Chris Rea. Sadly, we heard the news earlier that he's passed away at the age of 74. He's not been a well man throughout a lot of his life, but his musical legacy is just vast, with so many songs from the 70s, 80s and 90s. I mean, one of his great songs, Fool If You Think It's Over, apparently was written for his sister after a relationship of hers went wrong. It's a great song. It was covered by, who's that female singer who was in the band Vinegar Joe with Robert Palmer? Elkie Brooks. She did a version of it. So, I mean, it's a great song and his legacy is great. But just as a little sidebar activity for the next couple of hours, if you do love your music and you want to prove me wrong, because why wouldn't you want to prove me wrong, right? I think The Road to Hell is the only song written about the M25. If I've got that right or wrong, let me know. 87222. 844 start your message with the word talk. 0344 499 1000 for your WhatsApps, your voice notes or your calls. After the 11 o'clock news, we'll look at Tuesday's front pages in the company of Amy Fisher. Amy is a former director of communications for the Conservative Party. We'll talk to her after 11 here at Talk.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants. And as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's Duncan Barkes here. It's Talk. Good to have you along. The front pages for Tuesday morning upon us here, including the front page of the Daily Telegraph. The headline, non-crime hate to be scrapped. Telegraph saying incidents branded threat to free speech will be replaced by, quote, common sense approach. Whatever that means, that's on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. And no great surprise, and rightly so, a picture of Chris Rea, who we were talking about earlier, who we found out died at the age of 74. Elsewhere on the front page of the Telegraph, a really, really interesting story. Don't switch to 4-day week. Minister orders councils. This is Steve Reed, who's the community secretary. He's warned all leaders of English local authorities that they may be considered to be failing if staff are paid a full week's wages for 4 days of work. We have seen there's a local authority, I have to check where it is, it might be in this place, South Cambridgeshire, who switched to a 4-day week a while ago, and there are other councils that are thinking, well, it's not a bad idea. You know, 4 days, same amount of money. And you've got Steve Reed, the community secretary, putting down a bit of a marker on the front page of the Telegraph saying, don't do that, otherwise you'll be classed as a failing council potentially. That's the front page of the Daily Telegraph. The Guardian, families plead with Lamy over Palestine Action hunger strikes. You will be familiar with this story. Families and supporters of Palestine Action affiliated hunger strikers have pleaded with the Justice Secretary David Lammy to meet them in an attempt to end the impasse over the protest that has left some of them severely unwell. I think I'm right in saying 2 of them being taken to hospital. That's the front page of The Guardian. The I newspaper talks about people been working in killer kitchens. A young worker diagnosed with the incurable lung disease, sicillosis, I think I've got that right, as well as COPD, after cutting quartz kitchen worktops in, quote, a fog of dust. That's a health story on the front page of the Eye. The Sun for Tuesday morning concerning Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the man formerly known as Prince. Police seize Andy gun licence is the latest revelation in this quite sordid tale of the person we used to know as Prince Andrew. That's the front page of The Sun. The Financial Times talks about a lot of financial stories, way beyond my understanding. However, there's one here that says retail therapy, stores look for festive healing, shoppers in London's West End browse for last-minute gifts before Christmas. And the Daily Express, let's all back Britain's vibrant high streets, is their front page. Joining me in the Talk studio to go through the front pages and to chew over the stories in glorious detail is Amy Fisher, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party. Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you. Are you looking forward to the looming festivities?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people. I actually sort of love Christmas.
Yeah.
I smugly kind of start my Christmas shopping in sort of August, so I'm all very well prepared and not one of these people that's been kind of running around in a bit of a panic today.
Marvellous.
So.
And just so we've got some context, in your house on Christmas Day, is it turkey or beef or goose?
It's very traditional.
Yeah.
It's turkey.
Yeah.
It's sprouts. It's
Nice.
all the just super traditional. Although I maintain that the two most important elements of the Christmas lunch is the gravy and the bread sauce.
Yeah, because if it's duff gravy,
You can't. There's no coming back.
you can't do
from it.
anything,
Sort of
can you?
everything's-
It's game over.
Yeah, game over.
Shocker.
I agree.
Listen, thank you for coming in on this Christmas week. You've been looking through the front pages. What have you got?
I actually just want to, well, sort of about Chris Rea, because I don't think we could sort of talk about anything on the front pages, because he is on, his death is on all of them, as you would have expected. And obviously I've heard in your, you know, the last hour you've had lots of guests sort of talking about him and, you know, sort of how iconic he was and these incredibly well-known songs, you know, The Road to Hell and Driving Home for Christmas and all the rest of it. So I don't mean to sound like an absolute sort of heretic by admitting I thought he was American.
Did you?
No, genuinely, and because that song that is played, you know, maybe I shouldn't have admitted this, but it's been played, you know, sort of every, you know, this time of year, every year for the last sort of 30 years or whatever it is, you know, Driving Home for Christmas. I thought it was like, you know, one of those kind of American, like, road trippy type things, and also his voice has that very soulful, very low timbre. So I'm not sure whether I'd sort of gotten confused. I suppose there was a sort of hint of a twang of an accent.
Do you know, I have a sympathy. I have sympathy with your view there, because if you didn't know who Chris Rea was, and we were talking earlier to our showbiz reporter, that you could if you didn't know anything about him, you could listen to some of his songs and think he was an American blues singer.
This is what I mean. A sort of a Johnny Cash-y typey vibe. That is literally who I thought he was. And then when I, you know, saw the news pop up that he had died, I was like, my goodness gracious me, he's from Middlesbrough. Yeah. And then obviously I read a bit more about it and realised, yes, the Driving Home for Christmas wasn't just about Ghastly Journey on sort of M25 and, you know, from his personal experience, but also that The Road to Hell was written about when he was going back to Middlesbrough in the late 80s and saw all the complete, you know, degeneration and all the jobs being lost and all the rest of it, which why when your caller mentioned at the end of your last segment that he'd ended up doing some work with Jeremy Corbyn and had become a bit more political, I suddenly sort of saw the link back through it. That was his experience that prompted him to write that song at the end of the 80s after...
Well, he also said he wrote it partly about the M25, which I have a degree of sympathy about. And I put a challenge to our listeners and viewers tonight, because I think that's probably the only song that's been written about the M25. That was my bold statement I made earlier.
I suspect you're going to be proven wrong.
Here we are. Apparently, Elizabeth Cook's Broke Down in London on the M25, that's the name of a song, is a poignant autobiographical country Americana song from her 2016 album Exodus of Venus. Who knew? So it's not the only song written about the M25. Are you familiar with any other Chris Rea music at all? Was it only Driving Home for Christmas
and Road to Hell?
And Road to Hell.
I mean, I can't. Those I would have known straight off the bat. There are probably others that are sort of, you know, in the memory bank somewhere that you know sort of heard on the radio in the background. But those for me are the two that I absolutely. As soon as I heard his name, I was like, oh, that's the Road to Hell singer. So that is obviously very, sad news. But then the other thing that I suddenly thought was, wasn't there one year where sort of several singers all died and sort of, I just seem to remember, because George Michael famously died on Christmas Day, I think about 2015 or 2016. I remember that very clearly, because obviously he's had some great songs which are always played kind of around Christmas. I think it might have been David Bowie that year as well. So I'll
get one of our team of thousands on the other side of the glass to look up Christmas rock and pop star deaths, just to see if we can put some meat on the bones.
It's obviously terrible when, you know, when anybody dies, obviously, but it's when these particularly iconic people whose songs you then so associate with this time of year, and the music can mean so much, like literally whether you are driving home or you're just so used to hearing this particular song at this time of the year when, you know, you're in the pub with your family or whatever. Can kind of surface all these memories which are so tied into...
Yeah, well, music is very evocative, isn't it?
This is what I mean.
I was listening to the broadcasting queen who normally does this slot, Petri Hoskin, earlier today, and she was talking in great detail about Christmas songs. Let's just spend a few moments chewing that over. Do you have a favourite Christmas song?
17. Stay Another Day.
Oh, really?
I'm just going to admit it.
Yeah.
Well, sort of...
Brave.
Brave, and I'm going to get even braver and say that, because it's going to really date me, but sort of I remember, you know, that being number one, you know, when I was a teenage girl.
I get it.
It then had all this, all that kind of
stuff. So that
was
was it Brian Harvey from He's 17?
Well, yes.
Are you saying you fancied Brian Harvey?
No. Actually,
he has problems reversing cars
over his own foot, as I recall. But it was just, you know, I was at boarding school at the time, so you literally couldn't walk down the halls or the dormitories without hearing that song blaring out from somewhere. And to your point about music being so evocative of the nostalgia and the memories, so every time I hear that, that's just a sort of that's the one for me.
I had a moment with Chris Rea and that song Driving Home for Christmas, genuinely driving home for Christmas. So I used to work at a radio station in Liverpool, and I was driving home for Christmas because I live on the south coast, and I was on the A31 just out of Farnham. And that
you can remember it so precisely.
Yeah, I can, because it came on the radio, and I found myself going, I'm driving home for Christmas. And this is Chris Rea on the radio and driving home for Christmas.
And you suddenly felt a little, that was all just meant to be, the way that came together.
Almost, and I started looking at the other drivers, and they felt just the same.
Oh, bless.
I think that's the lyric of the song, isn't it? So there you are. All right, we've done Christmas music and Christmas songs. Is this a list of artists who've passed away around Christmas time? Oh, you're on Christmas Day.
No, I do remember. It was quite there was just a sudden...
There's quite a list here. So George Michael
was...
Christmas Day 2016. James Brown,
yes.
Christmas Day 2006. Dean Martin, the Greek Dino, 1995. Eartha Kitt,
yes,
who did the original of Santa Baby, 1953. Yes, again, you want me on your pop quiz team. She was 2008. Johnny Ace. I'm afraid I don't know who Johnny Ace is. Do you know who Johnny Ace is?
No, I don't.
That was 1954. And Charlie Chaplin died on Christmas Day 1977. Wow, I've learned something.
No, as I said, I just remember
public service broadcasting at its best.
The George Michael one, I just remember there being some others around that time.
Yeah.
But then just on the subject of someone conversed, I must just tell you that if I have to hear Mariah Carey,
dreadful. It is too much, isn't it? So yeah, well, I think we've alluded to it. So Stay Another Day is the evocative Christmas song for you. What's the Christmas song that you can't stand?
Well, exactly, it's Mariah Carey.
It is Mariah Carey.
It just literally makes me want to gouge my own eyes out with a spoon. It's just it really sets my hackles up.
I can understand. I think.
And you, if I can ask back.
No, well, you see, I think it's Slade.
Okay, no, I can see that.
I have a lot of sympathy with Slade because I think most people just know them for Merry Christmas. What's it called? Everybody? Yeah, Merry Christmas, Everybody. And yeah,
everyone, I think.
Is it everyone or everybody? Merry Christmas. Because there's one Shakin' Stevens, and Shakin' Stevens is Merry Christmas, Everybody, isn't it? I can't remember anyway. We all know the Slade Christmas song, but it's a song that most people know them for. Yet they recorded loads of great other songs like So Far Away that they never really get the recognition. Let's move on from Christmas songs. What else have you got?
So where you started with that front page of the Telegraph, I think there will be an awful lot of people looking at that, main story, non-crime hate be scrapped. This follows a kind of litany this year, and the police in general have actually had, well, the Met Police in general have had a pretty terrible year, and so Mark Rowley himself has sort of not come out of it super well. And in this whole, area of what on earth, with all the things that people should be doing to protect, people and their property and keep us safe, which I think every sort of person would believe is literally the main reason for the police to be there. I think people have been left baffled by a number of very significant, very high-profile occasions this year where the police seem very much to be veering into a sort of freedom of speech type realm.
Yeah.
The most famous one, but most high-profile one referenced in the article here was the Father Ted creator, Graham Lynham, who was arrested.
Yeah.
So sort of five police officers turned up to apprehend him after he was getting off a plane because he'd basically said something not very favourable about Donald Trump, and then it sort of ran into some other views that he'd expressed on the whole sort of transgender debate. But that just sort of seemed to be turning into real thought crime, infringement of infringement of freedom of speech. That you've got 5 police officers turning up for somebody saying words which may be hurtful and may offend some people, but are certainly not in the realm of, say, the number of rapes or thefts or burglaries or violent crime that is going not even unsolved but unpursued by the police. So as I say, I think a lot of people, particularly after this year, with a few of these very high-profile cases of kind of thought crimey stuff, almost sort of slightly Orwellian in a way, that a lot of people will be looking at this and feel quite heartened that goodness, this sounds like a return of common sense.
Well, it's long overdue, isn't it? I just find myself, whenever we read these stories, wondering how we got to this point where police resources ends up being used effectively policing opinions. For what most people believe are not policing priorities,
exactly. Let alone, dare I say it, the people who join the police themselves. I can't imagine there are many, coppers out there going, I've done all this hard work and I've, passed through Hendon to turn up to somebody's door to say, apparently you sent some slightly angry emails to your child's school because you don't believe that, the teachers are doing a very good job. Another recent example, real-life example.
A very real-life example, and I think we're in complete agreement with this, but I often find myself thinking, when did this start? What was the catalyst for this? Where in society did we start to go, oh, look, there's some police officers knocking at someone's door at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning because they said something that someone got upset about on social media. When did that start?
Well, I just don't know. Is one interpretation that was kind of mission creep, because obviously we do have things that do need to be policed in the true meaning, about sort of expressions of anti-Semitism or homophobia
or inciting violence,
or any of those kind of true harm causing things. So was it a sort of mission creep out of that combined with just the explosion of social media and how ubiquitous that is, and no part of government. So in all of these, I'm actually not going to put all of the blame on the police, because government is responsible for sort of policing priorities and the laws that the police are there to enforce, and government doesn't really understand social media and how platforms are being used. So I think it sort of became this unholy kind of genie that got out the bottle that then just became, blown out of all proportion through the examples that we've discussed, and hence how we sort of all ended up here thinking, well, goodness, isn't this ridiculous?
Just absurd. I mean, what's interesting in this Telegraph piece on their front page, it says that under the plans, police forces will be instructed not to log hate incidents on crime databases and instead treat them only as intelligence reports. All officers will be issued with, quote, a common sense checklist to go through before they take any action to prevent police intervening in spats over tweets or offensive comments. I mean, again, you make the point rather brilliantly that I can't imagine many coppers came out of Hendon thinking this is what I want to do for the rest of my career. What I find quite depressing about this report, though, is the fact now we have to give serving police officers a common sense
I was about to say, that's almost oxymoronic.
Yeah, exactly.
As a phrase,
Yeah. You've either got common sense or you haven't.
Or you haven't. You have a sense of what's right, and or you don't. But as I say, you know, we seem to have let the genie so far out the bottle. If there can be any kind of stepping back and reversal on that, I think this should be welcomed. To your point about the police recording of data, I mean, that sort of gave me a slight shiver for a different and not very good reason. Is that in all parts of crime, be it we happen to be talking about sort of violent versus non-crime hate here, but in all facets, be it sort of domestic violence or sort of child abuse, you know, police forces are not good at gathering accurate data, and they were even less good at analysing it, and even less good at sharing it across police forces. So just to your point, if they are making any tweaks or changes around data sharing, they need to be extremely clear what they are, because as I say, there are huge problems with the way police collect any sort of data at the moment anyway.
I think you're right. Amy Fisher is here, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party. We're going through the front pages of Tuesday's newspapers, and we'll continue in a few moments' time here at Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We're shifting through Tuesday's front pages. I'm Duncan Barkes. It's Talk. Amy Fisher, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party, is alongside me. Let's look at this other story on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, which I'm surprised about, to be honest with you, because it's not often I'm in a position to give positive reaction to anything that this Labour government has done.
I suspect we might be in the same position again, because I had exactly the same reaction.
But it appears that Steve Reid, who's the Community Secretary, is putting down a bit of a marker to leaders of local authorities, of which one has been running a 4-day week, where people get paid the same amount of money for 4 days as they do for 5. This is South Cambridgeshire District Council. That's already happening, but he's saying we don't want any more of this.
Well, good. And I say this is a rare moment of common sense, and something I entirely agree with from Labour government. I mean, this is complete madness.
It is madness.
Because, as you said, it's being paid the same amount of money for a four-day week. So, you know, I think this has been a bit of a creep, obviously, from, you know, the ghastly COVID years, where everybody's work timetable and going into the office got completely flung up into the air, and people basically just got out of the habit through circumstances beyond their control. They got out of the habit of having a normal 5-day working week. But the fact that now some councils are suggesting that this should be the norm for the same amount of money is completely boggling. When we have half of London boroughs basically saying, we think we're about to go bankrupt in the next year.
Exactly.
We've got 2 of the country's biggest councils, Birmingham and Nottingham, Labour run. I'm not making a cheap political point, but they are. In terrible trouble. I mean, Birmingham, they haven't even been able to get their rubbish collected for going on a year.
It's remarkable that's still happening, isn't it?
And no one sort of knows about. I mean, I sort of forget it's happening, and every few weeks I kind of think, oh my goodness, is Birmingham still under a great pile of rubbish? Like,
well, the media, we are partly to blame for that, because when it first started happening, it was everywhere.
And the winter discontent vibes.
Yeah, we had all that. It was back to the 1970s.
Yeah.
Then kind of like, it was journalists and broadcasters, we go, we've done that now, let's move on. But you're right.
But it's not absolutely
in Birmingham. I was in Birmingham. When was I in Birmingham? a few months ago, and it was a genuine shocker. I mean, I don't want to be too vivid about it, but you go down streets in a cab and you just see these piles of bin liners, and
well,
you think...
The best one I heard was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, that the sort of interim company that had been bought in, presumably at vast expense, for money council taxpayers have already paid to have their rubbish collected, but isn't being collected because the unionised bin workers are in this dispute with the council. The interim company they bought in had then decided they also agreed with the bin workers. So were they also going to go on strike? I mean, there's people have said this, that actually, politics, be it between, here and America, you can't do satire about politics anymore because it's happening. It's already there.
It's real.
So, like I say, when other councils are sort of seemingly thinking this seems like a jolly good idea, that we're expecting people to pay the same amount, if not more money, for us to do less work when we're so badly managing their local area anyway. I mean, it's for the birds.
You make a really good point, because satire is gone now, hasn't it? Because, we now live in a country where we had a Deputy Prime Minister / Housing Secretary who had to resign because she didn't understand how stamp duty worked. I mean, it's a script worthy.
We had one of her junior ministers, the homelessness minister, who had to resign for sort of not being a particularly good landlord. We had a anti-corruption minister in the Treasury having to resign because was found potentially guilty of fraudulent practices in another country. I mean, it's just sort of...
It is remarkable.
I mean, we had, I think the first sort of casualty of the Labour government was
the
Transport Secretary who had to resign about, I never quite understood, but whether her BlackBerry or her iPhone had been stolen.
A little bit confused about mobile phone ownership, I think, is a way of summing it up.
There we go, that's quite neat. So...
But the point I wanted to make is to echo what you said, which is that all of these situations are worthy of a yes Prime Minister, yes Minister script. And actually, sadly, it's political reality in this country.
Yes, although I fear that might not be a completely new thing. No. I mean, I used to work in CCHQ back, sort of even in opposition with David Cameron, and through into government. And obviously, we then had, in the thick of it. And actually, I still find it painful. I mean, that's 20 years old now. As funny as I know it is, I genuinely can't watch more than about 5 minutes of it because I find it so painful.
Do you get triggered?
No, I genuinely...
Really?
It's obviously, it's completely brilliant, but it's completely brilliant because it's hilarious, but also it's completely brilliant because it is so close to what that was. So, maybe the sort of death of satire where politics is concerned isn't a new thing. It just seems particularly acute at the moment.
Going back to this story about Steve Reed, the Community Secretary, showing a bit of spine here and saying to other councils, don't switch to a 4-day week. I mean, I think... Talk viewers and listeners will be going, about time too, because it always seems to be it's the public sector, and I don't want to upset if people are listening at the moment and they work in the public sector. It's not about bashing people in the public sector, but it always seems to be in the public sector where people seem to want to use an old phrase, try it on a bit, and well, why shouldn't I get the same amount of money?
One rule for one and another for sort of everybody else. And again, I've worked with some absolutely brilliant civil servants, truly, brilliant people, and I've worked with some absolutely awful ones. So, in that sense, like any big organisation, there will be a range of, talents and ability and commitment. But I agree with your overall point. Like, you don't get private sector firms coming up with an idea that it will be jolly nice to work one less day a week for the same amount of money whilst I'm still not meeting the targets for public service in the first place.
Yeah. What I found fascinating about this original council that finally did their trial for the 4-day working week, and now it's become permanent, it's a Lib Dem council. There were various interviews that were done around the time when this trial stopped being a trial and it just became, this is how it's going to be. And there are people from the council, but also there's like a 4-day week campaign who want everyone working a 4-day week. And they would be interviewed on stations like us and elsewhere, and they'd go, it's perfectly all right. Perfectly all right, because standards aren't dropping. Standards are being maintained if it's 4 days. And I found myself incredulously thinking, hang on, you shouldn't be talking about maintaining standards. You should be exceeding standards, because as a taxpayer, that's what I'm paying you to do.
I think that's the same response that just triggered in me, because it's sort of like, well, if you're achieving the same standards and doing the same amount of work in 4 days, why weren't you doing better when you were doing 5? Because that's just, you just had more time to then be doing more. So, look, I think well, it's your point really. It's that's a nice one rule for some and another for the public sector, and it's, you know, me and you, another, you know, taxpayer who meets the bill for it. So, but to sort of end on a more positive note, you know, they have been given this very clear signal from the government that it would not be welcomed. I mean, whether that actually causes pause for thought for any of them, I guess remains to be seen.
Yeah, I am surprised by this because we know that in many cases Labour is in hock to the unions. The unions per se are pretty supportive of this 4-day week idea, and the Telegraph are reporting that 25 councils have discussed a 4-day week policy. So it would be interesting to try and understand the thinking behind Steve Reid as Community Secretary. Is why now has he spoken out? Is it because so many of them are going, we want this, or is he trying to show a bit of muscle to maybe appeal to people like you and I, so we end up talking about it going, oh well, Steve, no, nice one, mate.
Well, I think there's a couple of interlinked things there. Is I don't think he actually has any, I think any kind of legal mechanism to stop any council from doing this would be incredibly difficult. I don't actually think he's got an easy lever whereby he could actually prevent this. I mean, the sort of other the other sort of problem I'd put into this is, you know, a whole raft of local council elections have been postponed because of this government's reorganisation. So actually, if you as a, you know, a local taxpayer have a council that moves to this, or you're worried about anything, you may not have any means of making your absolute displeasure of that known, because your local elections have just been postponed. So this is actually not just that top line area. It's also, I don't think it's right. My council should be working, you know, if you for days for not really the same amount of work. It's then, but I've been disenfranchised and I don't have any way of actually.
Well, there is a way, and I've seen people online suggest this. I'm not advocating it because it'll be breaking the law, but I've seen people say, well, you cancelled my election.
Withholding council tax.
I'm not going to pay my council tax.
I know, but I say that you will get into.
Yeah. But people are angry about it. They're so angry.
Well, because council tax is a lot, and it's only going to go up more as councils are absorbing, you know, ever higher costs for sort of social care, ever higher costs for all the, you know, SEN, special educational needs. And no one's. If your council moves to a 4-day week, no one's going to see their council tax even remain the same. Like, everybody's council tax is just going to go up again year on year. And for some councils, the government have removed the absolute cap on it. So in some places, you're going to really feel it for what is then going to be on the ground. No improvement in services whatsoever. So. And
at the same time telling us we need to have another bin when it comes to recycling our food waste or something else. It's just chaotic, isn't it? Listen, we'll come back and look at more of Tuesday's front pages. I'm Duncan Barkes. With me in the studio is Amy Fisher, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party, and this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Tuesday morning's front pages. Let's turn our attention to the Times. This is an interesting story, Amy. Cost of union officials paid time off to be secret. Hang on a second, how does this work?
So this is something somewhat sinisterly called facility time, which by any union rep within an organisation gets to legally and reasonably spend a certain amount of time, for which they're paid within their salary, to do sort of basically union, i.e. essentially political related work. For absolutely years and years and years, the Conservative Party, has put in FOR, Freedom of Information Act request, and parliamentary question after parliamentary question to try and find out exactly how much this is essentially costing the taxpayer. And this just seems to be another sort of complete blow to that, saying it's going to be kept completely secret. It's sort of rolled in to the Employment Rights Act, that there's sort of the union officials' rights to not have to reveal how much of their time is going into union-related activity, and the facility time is being sort of, their right to keep that secret is being further strengthened in this extremely controversial Employment Rights Act. So I should imagine there'll be people in CCH, well, I know there'll be people in Conservative Central Office looking at this, tearing their hair out, but yet still planning their next round of Freedom of Information Act requests to try and work out exactly, as I say, how much this is costing, every taxpayer. And yes, the fact the right to the secrecy part is being strengthened by the Employment Rights Act just sort of rubs salt into the wound. This bill is so controversial that may have been well conceived at the outset in terms of giving employees more rights, but the more you put at the strands of it, the more I'm not sure whether it is actually even going to protect employees.
I know.
As well as putting way more burdens onto particularly sort of SMEs who are quite frightened about some of the...
Well, there's a couple of things around this. I mean, the Employment Rights Bill, we should actually chew over in a bit more detail shortly, but let's just stick with this Times front page, cost of union officials paid time off to be secret. Predominantly it's a public sector story, because most people in unions tend to work in the public sector, not exclusively, but certainly the majority of it. This is against a backdrop where we have schools going, we need more money, the NHS always saying we need more money, and yet here we've got a story where our hard-earned taxes are being used to fund the NHS and the education system, understandably so, yet a big chunk of that time is used on union activity that we're paying for, and we're not allowed to know how much.
And we don't even know... And we don't even know what union activity exactly is.
It's absurd. I mean, what does it? What could it mean? Not going up on someone's desk going, you member of the union? Here's your form, fill it out. I mean, what's going on here?
Well, we honestly have no idea. No. We have no idea either sort of what in actuality is or how much it's going to cost. So as you say, it's sort of just another, it's costing us something, but we're literally being told, well, even when, as I say, it has been subject to so many Freedom of Information Act requests, so many questions in Parliament, and they're going a step further to keep any of that information, which I think should legitimately be in the hands of the taxpayer, who is footing the bill for it.
Why do we put up with this? I mean, this is your look of exasperation there spoke volumes. But I mean, it is just a shocker, isn't it? Here we are, and people listening get out of bed. They call it alarm clock Britain, right?
Yep.
We go to work because we have to. Want to provide for our families. We
probably
pay
5 days a week.
Probably 5 days a week, unless of course you work for South Cambridgeshire District Council. We put in a day's graft. We want to provide for our families and ourselves. We pay an increasing amount of tax. Then you hear a story about this, and we're not allowed to know what, particularly in this particular case, what this time is being used for, and indeed how much it costs us. And whenever I see a story like this, increasingly I find myself just thinking, we're being taken for mugs. Why do we put up with it?
Well, I don't know, and you're asking the wrong person. No. I sort of spent the best part of 20 years working for the Conservative Party. So, but I take your.
I'm frustrated by it.
But I think this is what people find so frustrating, and this is kind of typified, as I say, by the Employment Rights Act in here, which is, I don't think anyone's going to be a winner out of it. So even the employees, that much championed by, obviously Angela Rayner was leading, obviously, before she had to resign. It was all about the employees. We're going to stand up for you guys. But actually, some of the measures that have been proposed in it, like the changes to 0-hour contracts, actually either A, going to come in for a long time, or B, won't actually provide the protections and stop the abuses that it was always claimed they were going to. I think this act is actually quite dangerous for women in terms of the extra rights that are being given for, automatic time off for kind of caregiving and this kind of thing. I can see us turning back to a place where employers look at women and know that they will probably be bearing most childcare or elderly parent caring responsibilities and that sort of thing. And I can see then employers, becoming wary of, employing women again. The extra cost is put on businesses has meant that many businesses just aren't hiring very many people anymore. So the already beleaguered services and leisure industry,
hospitality sector,
which still hasn't recovered from COVID, and is often a place. My first proper job was, working as a waitress. Those jobs just kind of aren't sort of there for the 16, 17. If they're even 20-year-olds.
You make a really good point. This employment rights bill,
so it's not even helping the employees.
No, but it's damaging for young people, particularly to get that first entry job into the job market, particularly in the hospitality sector, because actually you look at it and just go, I don't want to hassle further down the line if you can't do the job, because it's going to be a pain in the backside to get rid of you.
Yes.
I'd rather employ someone who's a bit more seasoned and experienced. Ultimately, who loses out? A young person. It's not just about a job, but it's about their human development as an adult, isn't it? I mean, you worked as a, as you said, as a waitress. I worked in a convenience store. I learned about life from the age of 16.
Well, having to earn money to pay for stuff. I'm not being facetious, but I was talking to a sort of 23-year-old the other day, and they, actually they're sort of worked very hard at university and got a good degree and all that, but they've literally never had to do something for money. So quite literally in their 20s, the concept of, if I wish to buy something, I need to have earned the money. And it's not because they come from an incredibly wealthy family or anything like that. And actually, again, with COVID, there weren't the opportunities. But, as I say, the whole of the Employment Rights Act may have at some point had a very noble purpose behind it. How it's ended up in its actuality is so far from divorced what may have been, as I say, its noble intention, as to be quite damaging for pretty much everybody, as far as I can make out.
I can't see what the benefits are, apart from the fact that, and here I go again, if you work in the public sector, you've got a bit more legal protection for perhaps not working harder. All that sounds harsh, doesn't it? A response to that, 0344 499 1000, should you wish to. Amy Fisher is here, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party. We're going through Tuesday morning's newspapers, and this is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Going through the front pages of Tuesday morning's newspapers, I'm Duncan Barkes. Amy Fisher, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party, alongside me. We mentioned earlier many of the front pages featuring references to the death of Chris Rea, the singer, at the age of 74. Front page of The Sun and The Express and the Daily Telegraph. And we were mentioning earlier, I rather foolishly was asking the question about any other songs written about the M25, because I think The Road to Hell is probably the only song written about the M25. Which is one of Chris Rea's big songs, but I've been proven incorrect. This from someone whose phone number ends with 723. Chris Rea wrote the song on the M1 as a backseat passenger in a Mini at the time he was banned from driving. I always thought it was about the M25, but it could be about the M1, couldn't it? Because that's equally an horrific road. And one here from Gary and Polly Power. Duncan, Chris Rea was also a great artist. A few years ago, he produced an art book and 11 CDs of the blues, some early blues. Such a great man. Thank you for that. I wasn't aware that he was an artist. I'll look that up later. Let's continue going through the front pages. The Express, Amy, has a story about our high streets. Now, this is quite quirky. What have you got?
Well, I think if it's to be believed, is jolly good news. So the sort of, I mean, let's all back Britain's vibrant high streets.
Yeah.
Apparently, sort of post offices are sort of going to return in some sort of boosted up form, which is great. I mean, I increasingly thought post offices were sort of leaving.
I thought they'd all disappeared.
Well, certainly my local one is actually closing in some form, but apparently not. And as I say, this is to be we can't quite see all of the detail from what's on the Express, but as I say, if it's to be believed, this is great news, because, you know, I sort of, you know, hate seeing an empty shop on sort of my local high street, and there just seems to be this sort of vast proliferation of kind of, you know, charity shops and nail bars, you know, and neither of which I'm knocking, by the way, because I'd far rather have something in there than nothing. You know, I understand with also cost of living and other conveniences, it can be it's just much easier, much cheaper for people to do a lot more online. But I think if there is a way to bring our high streets as you know, better place for, you know, literally seeing people in our local communities with, you know, shops that we want to visit, and not just sort of, you know, vape shops, then that would be absolutely great.
Yeah, I mean, you're right to raise that point. I think now, and I think it started probably in the early noughties, by my reckoning, the identity of our high streets changed significantly. And now you could be in Truro in Cornwall, you could be in Milton Keynes, and actually, unless there were some signposts, you wouldn't know where you were, because the high streets are massively identical. And you're right, nail bar, vape shop, mobile phone bar, a raft of coffee shops. And I've never, I mean, I like a coffee like most people, but I genuinely do not understand. I get the business model because it's quite cheap, it's quite easy to make money out of coffee because your outgoings are quite low, but I never understand how a small town can have
5 coffee shops
or even more. I mean, how are they sustainable? So our high streets have just become identikit, so anything that actually creates a bit of diversity is good. But you're right about the post office, because I mean, I've known post offices disappear. And there's always a local campaign, and rightly so, because it does tend to be the older generation who value having somewhere to go to the post office for all kinds of reasons. And post office services being transferred elsewhere. So I live in Chichester in West Sussex. They you know, there's now, if you like, a post office desk in a bookshop.
Oh, well, this is, so I'm in East Dulwich, and there used to be 3 post offices sort of when I first moved there. There's now the one main post office, which itself is the premise of being taken over, and so there's going to be like a desk there, and then also kind of visiting maybe occasionally the library. But then it's ridiculous, because obviously at the moment, if you want to go to the post office to literally post anything, you know, the queue is 20, 30 people. So it's not as though the demand, okay, it's Christmas and so on, I'm not being facetious, but it's not as though, you know, the demand isn't there. And also, frankly, at the moment, the post office is one of the last to machines to get actual cash from in East Dulwich, which also, I know we've all got so used to tapping your card or your watch or whatever, but I would never want to do entirely without cash. And actually, a lot of people, and maybe perhaps older people, they shop with money. They shop with actual, sort of notes and whatnot. And so if the post office is closing, it's not quite clear to me whether we're again going to be left with, one cash point for the entirety of sort of East Dulwich.
Well, you're bang on the money, because if you pardon the pun.
I was about to say no puns intended.
That wasn't scripted. Because this story on the front page of the Daily Express talks about how the police office chief vows to, quote, strengthen services and access to cash in 2026. And that cash point is really, really important, because it does tend to be older people, again, who value having access to cash. I hate the idea of living in a cashless society. And increasingly, I get quite frustrated now. There's some shops that I go into and they will only accept cards. And I think that's really disgraceful. I think as a customer and a consumer, you should have the choice. If you want to pay by cash, you pay by cash. If you want to pay by card, good luck to you. And I'm not really a conspiracy theorist, but what I find quite concerning is if we all accept we're going to have a cashless society and everything is done electronically and online, then it's only a small step away from people deciding to find out what you might spend your money on, because there is a paper trail.
I think a Nectar card already does that, doesn't it?
A what card?
A Nectar card, or any kind of
I know,
loyalty
but
type.
I just think you can't trust big organisations with data.
Well, I don't wish to sound even more conspiracy theorist than you, but for the same reason, like I always carry a certain amount of cash, not a lot, because I find it really frightening the way you can be so reliant, say, on your phone for literally paying your Oyster, paying for anything in a shop, and what happens if your phone, dare I say it, runs out of batteries, or your network provider goes down, or God forbid you get one of those kids on an e-bike going past you and whipping it out your hand, and you're then just left so vulnerable if you're entirely reliant on just one kind of.
So what do you use cash for? Because you and I are similar. I've always got cash in my wallet, and I don't actually
really use it for anything, but I just sort of have it.
Okay.
It is my kind of backup. I don't. By default, I do pay on card, but as I say, I don't leave the house without having a bit of cash somewhere.
Gives you a bit of comfort.
Okay, with comfort, exactly. If my phone got stolen, or if I drop my Oyster card or something, I'm not totally bereft.
I just carry it because I believe cash should be king ultimately, and I resent the point I made earlier that some places now just go, oh, we're card only. I just find that offensive, really.
In fairness to them, because I have had this conversation with one of my local shops, is because it's so hard for them to do the banking because of the closure of all the high street banks. It's genuinely very difficult for a small store to have somewhere to literally, take the week's takings.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. So that's the front page of Tuesday's Daily Express, and I suppose really we ought to give some time to the front page of Tuesday's Sun newspaper. I mean, it's difficult to know where this story is going to end regarding.
Well, I don't think it is it? Because
Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
Well, I don't think it is going to end, because even just in the last few days we've had more and more just grot after grot of photos being released from this huge cache from the Epstein files, in the States, and as ever, Prince Andrew sort of seems to be so deeply mired and front and centre, and literally pictured in all of these photos. He's had the indignity of losing his titles. I think it was just even last Friday, a few days ago, he lost his last remaining military honours. He's rightly being kicked out of the Royal Lodge, where he'd been apparently paying a sort of peppercorn rent. On the front page of one of Monday's papers, there's a story about one of his daughters, seeking just distance.
Oh, it was Beatrice at Christmas.
Exactly.
Yeah, she's going skiing or something.
Seeking to sort of distance herself from him in some ways. And now, yes, this front page of the Sun is police seize Andy gun licence. I mean, it doesn't particularly say why. It doesn't really matter. It's just another reminder that this man, who he was a hero for the nation in the 80s. After the Falklands War, for which he was decorated for literally his bravery as a naval pilot.
And famously not sweating.
Famously, it caused him not to sweat,
Yes.
as we know from the BBC Emily Maitland's interview. And then, he was at his peak after that. And he had a bit of a reputation as a sort of the Playboy prince.
Well, they called him Randy Andy, didn't they, the tabloid press for a bit?
It was a tabloid kind of nickname which didn't hint at anything more sinister. It just suggested he liked the ladies, which he kind of did. Yeah. And then just if you compare that fall from grace into just as I said, this mired in this utter grot of whatever his relationship with Epstein was and whatever or not may have been the settlement behind the Virginia Giuffre stuff, who knows, but it is a grim Christmas for him.
For him, and also for Buckingham Palace, because this will be a front page they won't want to see on the front page of The Sun, because this story regarding Andrew Mountbatten Windsor continues to be in the spotlight, continues to get
overshadow anything else.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of positive work the royals are trying to get out there. We saw Prince George in I suppose you'd call it a homeless kitchen recently, serving up roast potatoes and stuff. They're trying to change the image of the royals for the future, which is the right thing to do. But alongside that, and constantly occurring, are stories like this. Here's Andrew yet again. It's a story about him on the front page of The Sun.
Exactly.
Yeah, police seize anti-gun licence. Ultimately, I had this conversation with someone else a few weeks ago. Should he not do the decent thing and just leave the country and just go somewhere else? I mean, I'm sure there are a couple of countries around the world where he could go and just actually remove this constant headache he's given to the royal family.
I agree with you, but the premise of your question is flawed, because you started by saying if he were to do the decent thing. Now, he could have done the decent thing by I don't know, going back to the first principles of choosing not to remain friends with a known paedophile. I'm not trying to rewrite history and say he should have known never to associate with Epstein. We don't know what he knew when. We do know he took that walk, the famous walk in Central Park with Epstein, when it was known that Epstein was an absolutely horrendous person. So at any point, kind of since then, he could have done a decent thing, and he's shown himself utterly incapable of doing so.
Yeah, and we do know that he continued communications with
as did his wife.
After he said, I stopped communicating with
him.
Yeah. You're right to call me out on that. Not that you called me out in a horrible way, but it's about decency and perhaps being honourable. And
which he so famously claimed that he was. And it's just, I think being honourable is one of those things that the more you sort of say it, I'm so honourable, it's one of those things you shouldn't have to say. And the more you sort of say it, the more you kind of think, are you?
Yeah, it's very easy to say, isn't it? And you mentioned also his former wife, Sarah Ferguson, who doesn't come out of this at all.
She's had to resign from all her charities, or she's been dumped from all of them because she was still, talking of herself as knowing that, Epstein had been a true and loyal friend. Again, after it was known, what he'd been up to. But it's that. Not a good story, but happily the front of I think it's the Mirror, actually refers to Charles, the king of industry. Charles is the year's hardest working royal despite his battle with cancer. Nice photo of the smiling king.
I'm a big fan of Charles. I really am. I mean, I know he's been tainted by his, parts of his previous life, notably Diana. I still know people who are royalists but will never forgive Camilla. But I think what he's doing at the moment is absolutely first class, particularly with all of the personal challenges he's facing. Yes, exactly.
Because I think it was always usually, is it Princess Anne who's usually the hardest working? She's the patron of all these very noble charities. And as you say, when he's a man in his 70s, it was 77, battling cancer, hardest working royal, and I believe he does want to do best for the country.
Well, this front page of the Daily Mirror says not only is he the hardest working royal despite his battle with cancer, but this is remarkable. He's clocked up 532 engagements this year. That's 330 more than his son William.
Wow.
I mean, that's putting in a shift, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's putting in a serious shift. Listen, Amy, it's been fantastic to meet you, and thank you for coming in. Let's just talk about your looming Christmas week. We know it's very traditional in your house on Christmas Day. Turkey. Got to get the gravy bang on, spot on. Got to get the gravy
bang on.
Yeah.
Tend to do presents in the afternoon.
Oh, that's interesting. Before or after lunch?
After the Queen's speech, because I was going to say, good Lord, we're not going to miss that out.
Oh, wow.
No, so you go for a walk along the seafront. I used to say,
King's Speech.
Suffolk.
Yeah.
Walk along the seafront, get back, have a gin and tonic, have all the lovely turkey, Queen's speech, and then settle down for some present opening and hopefully some not too acrimonious games, which means definitely not getting the Monopoly board out. Yeah, I know that can be quite divisive in a family situation. So that's your Christmas Day. Boxing Day? Because I prefer Boxing Day over Christmas Day. I don't want to be controversial, but go on. No, kind of more of the same, really. Just more gin. more gin, cold bread sauce. I like it cold as well. See, I think Boxing Day food. Charades, all of that. Let's just spend a moment on the food because I live to eat and drink. Boxing Day food is superb. It is about the cheese, isn't it? It's about the cheese board. Yeah. All right. How long have we got? Just give me 30 seconds on your ideal cheese board. As stinky, runny, like stinking bishops, blue cheese. Oh, stinking bishop! That is an offensive cheese in a good way. In a very good way, and like you have to get it at room temperature, so it's actually like running out of its packaging, and you have to eat it with a spoon. Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you again for coming in, and the best for Christmas and for the new year. And for you and your listeners. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you, Amy Fisher, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party, going through the front pages of Tuesday's newspapers. Right. After midnight, let's get your calls on the air. 0344 499 1000. You can also send voice notes to that message. You can WhatsApp me on that number as well, and you can also text 87222. Start your message with the word talk. It's your time to talk after midnight, talking about the Conservative Party. Could it? Should it do a deal with Reform UK? And how do you rate Kemi Badenoch, leader of the Conservative Party? Do you think she's turned a corner inside the last couple of months? Let's get your calls on the air. 0344 499 1000. I'm Duncan Barkes. We're heading towards midnight here at Talk.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the Channel crossing as the dangerous bit, but actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many tens of kilometers have to be covered on foot by these migrants, and as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, it's Duncan Barkes here as we head into the early hours of Tuesday morning. I'm in for Petri Hoskin. If you're wondering where the broadcasting queen is, she's going to be here Tuesday afternoon, 1 p.m. That's Petri. I'm here through until 1 a.m. I know it's confusing, but these things happen around this time of the year. Ton of stuff to talk about over the next 60 minutes. 0344 499 1000. It's predominantly political, and I want to talk to you, particularly if you're someone who has reached the point where you just go, do you know what? I can't bear the thought of another term of a Labour government. And you might be on the right of the political spectrum. And if you are, chances are you're a Conservative or you are a Reform UK voter or supporter. So here's the deal. Over the last 24 hours, this kind of narrative has developed where there's been this idea floated, I think predominantly by the Conservatives. I've not heard much about Reform UK talking about it, but there have been some senior Conservative politicians who have not said they would not have a pact with Nigel Farage's Reform UK party. And this has come about chiefly because what we've seen, particularly of one newspaper, their poll tracker, now has the Conservatives on 18.5%, which is the highest average score since May. And some people are saying it's an early sign of recovery for Kemi Badenoch. Labour, meanwhile, have fallen to 18%, and Reform UK are hanging around on 29.3%. So you're getting this kind of conversation happening in the media and indeed in political circles, which is if Reform and the Conservatives had to join forces with some kind of pact or some kind of coalition or some kind of deal in order to stop Labour getting back into government, could that be a thing? So my question to you here on Talk is, would you put up with it? If you're a Conservative member, voter or supporter and you don't like Reform UK because their leader Nigel Farage has gone on the record persistently to say he wants to destroy, strong word but his word, your political party, how do you feel about the idea that there might be some Tories who are going, yeah, well, do you know what, we should probably do a deal with Big Nige? 0344 499 1000. Let's talk about that. Equally, if you're a Reform UK member, of which there are many, or indeed a supporter, and you find yourself going, yeah, but I left the Conservatives. I stopped voting for the Conservatives because they weren't Conservative anymore. Why would you want to do a deal with the Conservative Party? How do you feel about that? We talked earlier to Michael Crick, the broadcaster and the journalist, and I used the phrase earlier, there's a risk that Reform UK becomes a care home for failed Tory MPs. Now, that might be a little bit offensive, but all you have to do is look back at the recent defections, basically people who lost their job in the election of 2024, the general election. There were Tory MPs, they didn't get back in, and oh, well, what a surprise, they've decided to go and join Reform UK because presumably they think they might have a political career again. Is there not a danger that if you're someone who supports reform because you think that is the future and is going to properly upset the establishment and the political system, is there not a danger that your party just ends up with a load of old Tories that presumably you didn't like in the first place? 87222 is the text number. Start your message with the word talk. But I want to talk to people between now and 1 a.m. because that's what this show is all about, particularly in this hour. 0344 499 1000. It's the original social media. We can have a conversation. If you don't want to do that, send me a WhatsApp and I'll read it out. And equally, you can also send a voice note as well. A couple here before we talk to Stuart. This is Simon, who's in Bray. As a member of the Conservative Party, I would be totally against a pact with Reform. Rumours of the Tory demise are totally overstated, and the only reason that Labour did so well is because Tory voters didn't vote as opposed to voting for another party. If the core vote comes out at the next election and the Greens split the Labour vote, we might be looking at another Conservative government. This is not a tunnel vision view, it's just looking at the plain facts. That is really interesting, actually, in itself, the idea that many of the core Conservative voters just decided to stay home in July 2024 as opposed to vote for someone else. Another one here from Robin Sussex, just picking up on something we talked about in the last hour that's on the front page of, I think it's a Daily Telegraph, isn't it? Talking about the Community Secretary Steve Reed saying to councils, don't switch to a 4-day week. Robin Sussex says local councils doing 4-day weeks, if the council workers claim they're just as productive now compared to when they did a 5-day week, presumably they'd be happy to hand back 20% of all their previous earnings. Nice one, Rob. Let's get some calls on the air. Stuart, hello.
Hello, Duncan. Good to speak to you after a long time.
Are you still alive?
Of course I'm still alive.
Wow.
I was the last time we've spoken social media.
It's very good to hear your voice, Stuart. What are your thoughts?
Okay, I'm interested in the idea of a Conservative Reform Pact, with the Conservatives being dominant as the senior party.
Mm-hmm.
After all, you're going to have a lot of tactical voting between Labour and Lib Dems.
Right.
And let's face it, in Scotland and Wales, it might be an idea for Conservatives to support reform.
Right.
With reform not standing against true Conservative MPs and candidates.
OK, so you reach some kind of deal where Reform and the Conservatives say they divvy up the constituencies and you say, well, you can stand there, but we're going to stand there. Is that how it works?
Yes, because let's face it, Farage might get what we call the red wave. Kemi is doing great, but she's not going to have a Boris appeal in the Labour seats.
OK, that's interesting. So the Conservatives should do a deal with Reform in order to, well, so Reform can capitalise on what we know as the red wall and their success in those areas.
Let's face it, we lost a lot of good MPs due to Reform splitting the vote last time.
Well, that's true. But do you think the people who voted for Reform in July 2024 really care about the Conservatives losing a lot of good MPs and splitting the vote?
That was a panic. That was a sign of dissatisfaction against the Conservatives. Rishi had totally ditched Conservative policies and was turning us into an SDP-type party.
Yeah, I've heard often people say that there are quite a few MPs still within the Conservative Party who'd be probably better off in the Lib Dems.
Exactly. Because let's face it, him and Hunt weren't really Conservative.
You said something at the beginning of your call, and thank you, by the way, for calling up, the idea that, and I think I heard you correctly, the idea that if there were going to be some kind of deal, it should be the Conservatives, if you like, who are in charge. Did I hear you correctly?
Absolutely.
Yeah, how would that work with someone like Nigel Farage, who's he's his own man, isn't he? I can't imagine he's going to take orders from anyone else.
That is a problem with Reform. Farage, as you put it, is his own man. He's a one-man band. Because I'm sure somebody I know once worked for him.
Well, if you're referring to me, I didn't work for him. He was a client of a company I worked for, and it's well documented. You know, I dragged him out of a plane wreck in 2010. Yeah. But that's got nothing to do with his ambitions or his ability as a political operator. I mean, there will be people listening to us having this chat at the moment just going, but he is surrounded by other people.
But nobody,
well, hang on, let me make the point. He's not a one-man band. He's got people like Richard Tice and Lee Anderson and Sarah Pochin and recently Danny Kruger, who used to be a Conservative MP who's now crossed to Reform. So it's more than just Farage, isn't it?
OK, Richard Tice, successful businessman.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Kruger has never held a front bench post. Anderson, again, is best known for defecting.
Why does it matter that he's never held a front bench post?
Because if they want to be taken seriously as a government in the making, you need to know who their front bench spokesmen are. You have to hear.
So it's not. Are you making the point? Is it about not having the experience, or is it at the moment being the case that you don't know who's responsible for what portfolio within Reform?
It's both. They haven't got. You've seen what happens in Reform councils because of no experience.
But it's a chicken and egg, isn't it? You can make the argument that you only get the experience if you're doing the job.
But they haven't done the job, and that's why. Can you imagine if Kemi appointed, if Kemi won the next election and appointed the new intake to cabinet posts straight out?
All right. So you and I have spoken for many years on various radio stations over the decades, right? Are you still a Conservative activist?
Yes.
So you still put leaflets through doors and knock on people's doors on a Sunday morning when they're still in bed?
I'm working on a Sunday morning, otherwise I would. But I delivered to Harry's Christmas cards from Bob Blackman recently, if there's any good.
So you did what? You delivered Christmas cards?
Yes.
For Bob Blackman?
Yep.
Yeah, so you're still an activist, which, you know, is very laudable because there's plenty of people who complain about politics and don't get involved, so you're doing something about it. So presumably if you're a Conservative activist, you're also a Conservative Party member. If it was put to you as a member that there was going to be some kind of deal with reform in order to keep Labour out for a second term, how opposed to that would you be? What would be the deal breaker? I think that's the question I'm looking for. What would be the deal breaker for you? Would it have to be that Kemi's in charge?
Yes, 100%.
100%. And if she wasn't in charge and the deal was, well, Nige is going to be the next Prime Minister, if that meant potentially there was no pact or no coalition and there was a second term of a Labour government, do you want that on your conscience?
I cannot see Farage as a Prime Minister. I see him as a publicist. He'd make a good party chairman somewhere, a good PR man, yes. But I would see him as another Boris type. All spin, no substance.
It is interesting, actually. Michael Crick earlier said that, you know, he couldn't imagine that Farage would ever want to be Prime Minister just because of the details involved in the job. And actually, he would be better if we had a presidential system like being a president or possibly, as you suggested, even a chair of a political party. Stuart, good to talk to you. Anthony's in Surrey. Hello, Ant.
Hello, hello, Duncan. It's nice to speak to you after so many years. We used to speak on another station, didn't we, about this time at night?
Well, you're a man of impeccable taste. What are your thoughts?
Indeed. What I'm thinking about, Duncan, is, do you remember David Cameron, the detoxification of the Tory party? They took years, didn't they, to Theresa May, the nasty party. Why the hell did the Tories want to take on that ragbag of UKIP reform bunch? You know, having gone through all that process, this was about getting into power, wasn't it, years ago with David Cameron, to get rid of this baggage, the racism and so on. So that's that side of it. But
so hang on, let me just explore that point in a bit more detail. So what you think if the Conservatives buddied up to reform, somehow the Conservative Party would become toxic again?
Exactly, yes, I do think so, because what do they always say? Elections are always won from the centre, and that includes Labour.
Yeah, that's true, that's true. It's about taking sometimes the floating voters or the centre ground. But I'm interested in your introduction of the idea of toxicity of the Conservative Party in the past. Let's explore that in a little bit more detail. Do you think the Conservative Party, as it stands now in 2025, has got rid of what you call toxicity?
Not entirely. I mean, we don't know what's going on in those backbenches, do we? I mean, under Kemi, it's very fluid, isn't it? Kemi seems to be trying to mimic reform at the moment. Even Labour seem to be. But I think that's heading for the rocks. I think they've got to move back to the centre when we come to the election, maybe in 2 or 3 years' time. You know, we don't know what reform will do in government, do we?
What's your definition of toxicity?
Racism. You know, the whole immigrant thing.
What does that mean, though? Because you're right. You're right to point out the political history. We know that Theresa May talked about, you know, getting rid of the nasty party tag. What some might say, if being called the nasty party is because you have a hard line on illegal immigration, that's not about being nasty. That's just common sense politics and protecting our borders, isn't it?
Well, exactly, but it puts people like Kemi Badenoch into a strange position, doesn't it? Going on about immigrants, to an extent also Mahmood. She's taken that line. In some respect, Labour is taking on reform.
Well, hang on. Why does it put them in a difficult position?
Well, it's strange, isn't it? People like Rishi Sunak, because they've come from abroad, haven't they? They've come here. They've proved the success that people make.
Yeah, but you can still come from abroad, can't you? And have a hardline view on illegal immigration, can't you?
Well, illegal, yes, but that's the thing. It is a fairly minimal thing. Really, the implied agenda is of actually legal immigration, and that is the nasty side of it.
Let's just bring this full circle, if we can. This idea that there might be some deal done between the Tories and Reform UK as we head towards a general election. Do you think there's any mileage behind it?
I don't think so, because I never buy these takeovers. You know, when a big company takes over a little sort of challenger company, they always sort of bury the logo. They keep the logo for a while, don't they? Then they sort of, like Nestle takes over, I don't know, something. And for a while, like Macintosh, you know, Toffees or something, they keep the logo on there for a while, but then they quietly drop the logo. That's what I think will happen with the Tory party. They'll quietly drop reform.
Right. Okay. So what you just run that past me again. You think ultimately who would take over who?
Well, this kind of reverse takeover of Reform and the Tories, it's a kind of like happens in business, isn't it? Yeah, but I think that eventually they'll kind of, as I said before, swing to the centre. So there'll be a kind of a rather ageing faction as well with Tice and Farage and co. Where will they actually lie in the Tory party? It's sort of difficult to see, isn't it? In a few years' time when they're that bit older.
Anthony, an interesting call. Thank you for making it. It is Talk 0344 499 1000. If you just put us on, first off, I'm Duncan Barkes, sitting in for Petri Hoskin through until 1 o'clock this morning. Secondly, there's a couple of things we're chewing over here. It is political, and there is something else that I mentioned earlier that I will roll into this mix as well. The political side of this is all about this idea that the Conservative Party and Reform UK in the future may do some kind of deal to keep Labour out of 10 Downing Street for a second term. I'm keen to explore this with you and to find out whether or not, one, you think this has got legs, two, if you used to be a Tory and now you support Reform, how do you feel about this idea? Because, you know, I hear Reform supporters on this radio station, on this platform, who tell me they hate the Conservatives. So would it get your support? Let's talk about that. And also, I'd like to get a few calls and messages this morning about Kemi Badenoch. I wrote a piece for the Daily Express. I write a piece that appears every Monday, and in the Monday column, I talked about how it feels that Kemi Badenoch has turned a corner in terms of her leadership of the Conservative Party. It was a very rough few months to begin with. It seems that she's got better now at Prime Minister's questions. Her masterful takedown of Rachel Reeves after the budget in November, I think was just one of the great political moments of this year. Has she turned a corner? Could you find yourself now, if you're disenfranchised as a Conservative Party voter, could you find yourself now going, do you know what? I could probably vote Tory under Kemi, because she's proved her worth. 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApps and your voice notes. You can also text the word talk and your thoughts to 87222. And if you want to just a little bit of a break from the politics, we were talking earlier about driving, as the government's been urged to consider changing the licensing rules for those over the age of 70. If you have a group of people you think who are the worst drivers in the country, then I'd love to know about it. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barkes, and this is Talk, talking a little bit of political chat in the early hours. The Conservative Party and Reform UK, should they do a deal? Could you ever see a time when they form a pact in order to stop Labour getting into 10 Downing Street again? 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your voice notes and your WhatsApp messages. If you want to text, you're a little bit old school, 87222, start your message with the word talk. And also we're talking about driving as well. A curious story that drivers over the age of 70 could be required to get an eye test when they renew their licence every 3 years. The government facing calls by various lobbyists to do this in order to make road safer safety better. And it got me into the whole idea about who are the worst kind of drivers. And when we talk about maybe saying to those who are older, do you know what, you need to have an eye test, or you should go and get stuff checked out because your reaction times will be slower. Your eyes might be fading. Does this unfairly target older drivers, or do we need more of this? And if you do a lot of driving, maybe you're listening to me at the moment, you're a late night driver for whatever reason, do get in contact and tell me who are the worst drivers. I mean, I've got a massive list and I might go through it before the end of this hour. But let's take a call. Hello, Mick.
Good evening, or good morning, Duncan.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's going, and I'd like to share an observation, if I may, with you from down here in the capital, and that is I've observed over my many years of driving that there are, well, they're kind of industrial drivers, so you've got your, you know, the skip drivers.
You got your what drivers?
Skip, industrial, so industrial and professional.
Oh, the skip drivers.
Yeah, so you know the skips.
Yeah, I know what a skip is. Yeah, I just struggle to hear you. Are you not a fan of the skip drivers then?
No, much a breed on their own. You know, because they drop a skip off, pick a skip up.
Yeah.
You think they'll be on a, you know, a schedule or whatever.
Yeah.
And the next one is.
Well, hang on. Let's talk about the skip drivers. So, just so my listener is clear, my viewer is clear, you think that they've got a case to answer?
Skip drivers, yes. They well, yes. What I'm trying to say is they're obviously under a bit of pressure and they need to deliver.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
but I reckon skip drivers are some of the most skilled drivers on the roads.
I'll throw another one in there then. Scaffold drivers.
Scaffold drivers. You don't like them either?
No, they're really much the urban cowboys.
An urban cowboy. Go on. What's your experience of scaffold drivers?
Well, no, not just scaffold drivers, but scaffolders.
Right.
You know,
are you about to brand every scaffolder in the United Kingdom in the same way on this particular platform? If you are, that's fine. I just want to be clear. What are you going to say about them?
Good Lord, no. They're very much their own people.
Yeah.
And you know, they're like I say, the urban cowboys or wherever here in the UK. And
but when you say they're a cowboy, what do you mean by that? Are you saying they're lawless?
Well, a cowboy is a maverick. They're very much their own person. They're independent. They know what they need to do and to get done.
But when it comes to driving, Mick, what are they doing as scaffold lorry drivers that incenses you?
Well, they seem very focused on
putting up scaffolding.
No. Driving. We're talking driving. So, you know, when they're on the road.
Yes.
On the King's Highway now. And
all right. Let's see if we can just embellish this a little bit. So yes. I'm on the A3, a road I know really well, going through Wandsworth. All right, and for those people outside of London, that's it's a part of London that's got very expensive coffee shops. And this lorry that I'm following on the A3 going through Wandsworth is a scaffolding lorry, right? And I'm guessing it's a flatbed because you need a big space for all of the scaffolding poles, yeah?
Indeed.
You with me so far? So I'm following this scaffolding lorry on the A3 through Wandsworth. What am I seeing that they're doing as a driver that I'm not seeing with other drivers?
You're following. Well, okay, so what happens when you get to the traffic lights?
The traffic lights?
Yes, yeah. In London, inevitably you will do. Well, guess what? They're going to want to, beat you to accelerate in a way more robustly than your vehicle is.
Well, hang on, am I in front of the scaffolding lorry then, or behind it?
No, you're level pegging.
Oh, so they're racing me at the traffic lights?
Yes.
Why would they do that?
I don't know. This is exactly what you're trying to tap into, isn't it? The intellect, of the skip driver, the scaffold driver,
So given what you said, and the last thing I want to do is misrepresent you, but it sounds like you've had an experience where you've been at the traffic lights, either alongside a scaffolding lorry or a skip lorry, and they tried to race you off the traffic lights like some kind of boy racer in a Vauxhall Nova.
You're almost correct. And I can throw one more trade into here, the post office driver. The post office driver? What have they done? In the red vans. In the red van, like Postman Pat? Exactly. So far this morning, hang on, let's just take stock. This is really important. We've demonised skip drivers. That's all right. I'm not demonised. No, my word, not yours. No, it's fine. We've had a pop at scaffolding trucks, and now we're gonna have a go at Postman Pat. What's he done wrong? Not Postman Pat, no. Well, he drives a red van. Yes, but he doesn't drive. No, I'm talking about your modern day post office post worker in a red van. Yes. Yeah. What do they do wrong then? They got deliveries and pickups, mate, but they can also be quite robust in their driving manner. Have they tried to race you off the lights? Well, not exactly. Not like your scaffolders or your skip drivers. No, we've already consigned them to the car park of doom and destruction, given their appalling driving. But let's just nail Postman Pat and his like-minded friends. So what's Postman Pat doing? Yeah, but this is in down here in the capital of central London, I'm just saying. And it's not like the sedate sort of vision we've got of Postman Pat in the village and all of that. No. It's a lot different than that. I'm just saying, as an observation, maybe your other listeners and viewers may concur, and maybe they don't. But well, we'll put it out there. Mick in Bromley, thank you. So I asked for it, talking about who are the worst kind of drivers off this back of this story, that it looks like over 70s might have to have regular eye tests to make sure that their eyes work properly when they're behind the wheel of a car. I don't think that's a particularly bad thing. But as part of that chat, I'm asking who are the worst drivers? And as often happens when you do something like this, you get a revelation. And the revelation is so far this morning that scaffold drivers, skip drivers, and it appears Postman Pat and his like-minded friends should not be on the road. 0344 499 1000. Is that fair? Do you think we might be able to... would posties be up at this time, do you think? Might they? No, it's a little bit... It's too early, isn't it? Skip drivers, would they be up at this time? You don't see many skips being moved around at past midnight, do you? But if you know of a skip driver, or someone who drives a lorry with scaffolding poles, or indeed someone who drives a red post office van, maybe assess their driving for me. 87222 is the text number. Start your message with the word talk. Your calls, your voice notes and your WhatsApps to 0344 499 1000. Who are the worst drivers? And the Conservative Party and Reform UK, do you think they should do a pact to keep Starmer out of Downing Street, or indeed another Labour leader for a second term? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk. Looking at some of your messages coming in, Chris Morgan says, I think people called Mick are the worst kind of drivers. No particular reason, they just are. Oh, a little bit harsh, Chris. I mean, you know, is there some mileage behind the skip drivers, the scaffolding drivers, and indeed posties in their little red vans? Chris, thank you for your message. Elsewhere, this is Andrew from Salisbury. The worst drivers by far are tradesmen. Oh dear. Be a lot of tradesmen who listen to this show and this station. Often, there's a lot of serious allegations here, often uninsured. Well, wouldn't they get caught by the ANPR cameras that litter pretty much every city in the UK? Untaxed and no MOT. That's what I was told. We have these cameras everywhere that they can get spotted. They're cross-referenced with the database, and then someone can go, oh, you don't have any insurance. Andrew goes on to say a lot are under the influence of drugs and alcohol and break road safety laws like using mobile phones, and they don't wear seatbelts. Old men are second, as a lot think they can still drive like they are in their 30s, says Andrew from Salisbury. I'm going to make a statement before we talk to Cindy, and it's this. I went to a supermarket earlier today. It's quite a posh one. I only went there because it sells certain things I can't get elsewhere, and it's coming up to Christmas, right? That's the only reason I go there. It begins with the letter W. And I live in a place called Chichester in West Sussex. I won't say Chichester's sleepy. I like living where I live, but it is not the place you go for sex and drugs and rock and roll, right? And also it has a predominantly high older population, okay? Tends to be a lot of retirement flats and complexes there. And of course, well, depending how old you are, you might consider them to be baby boomers, you know, with their triple lock pensions and going on their cruises and being able to do their weekly shop at a supermarket that begins with the letter W. And I went there, and the car park today, no word of a lie, was like a Dodgems. It was genuinely frightening. People just reversing out without looking. I mean, I saw one bloke trying to park and he left it pretty much at a 45-degree angle. The common denominator, all of these people, I'm sorry to say it, had white hair. Okay, so there is some, I mean, they weren't wearing wigs, obviously, they were just older. There is something going on here with an older driver, I think, and maybe their lack of ability later in life. I'm trying so hard to be diplomatic. Their lack of ability later in life when it comes to perhaps driving sensibly and parking in a way that doesn't suggest you've lost all of your faculties. 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApp on your voice notes, text the word talk and your comments to 87222. Who are the worst drivers? And should people over 70 have regular eye tests just to prove they're safe behind the wheel of a car? And elsewhere, a little bit of political chat as well. Political chat regarding whether or not there could ever be a deal done with the Tories and Reform UK. It's been suggested in some quarters if it meant stopping a Labour government for a second term. Cindy is in Michigan. Hello, Cindy.
Duncan, hello. I have a question for you.
Oh, no.
Have you ever heard the expression, out of this world?
Have I ever done what?
Have you ever heard the expression, out of this world?
Out of this world. Yeah, I have. Yeah.
You are out of this world. Fantastic. We need, in fact, I'd like to steal you away to America because the presenters here are rubbish. Rubbish.
I couldn't, it's very kind of you, Cindy. I couldn't live in America because you can't do cheese properly. I'm sorry, I don't want to break it. I don't want this to ruin what potentially could be the beginnings of a beautiful friendship, but you cannot do cheese in the USA. Last time I was in the USA, I was in a supermarket in Daytona Beach, and what passed as an excuse for cheese, frankly, was like radioactive yellow in colour. So there's no way I could move to America because I wouldn't be able to get cheese I like.
You know what? I do extra sharp cheddar.
You would do what?
I love extra sharp cheddar.
Oh, extra sharp cheddar. You see, I call that a bruising cheddar because you bite into it and then you get that lovely sensation in your mouth where you go, do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
And about drivers, I think that, everyone here in America, you have to take an eye test every time you renew your license.
Oh, so regardless, Cindy, sorry to interrupt, is that regardless of age?
Regardless of age. The first time you get your license, they have you take an eye test. And if you wear glasses, you take the eye test with your glasses. Now, depending on which state you live in, here in Michigan, every 3 years, when you renew, you must take the eye test regardless of age. And I think that's really important because I think, personally, young drivers are terrible because they drive too fast. Older drivers tend to drive a little bit more slowly, and they're safer. Plus, they're always insured.
So, if I've understood you correctly, regardless of age, you have to have your eyes done how many years? How often?
Every 3 years.
Every 3 years.
Depends on the state that you live in.
So it's state dependent. It's not a national policy. So you can be in one state and it might be 5 years, another state you could be in 3 years.
Correct.
Do you think that's fair? Does that work? Does it make any difference?
Yes, because your eyes can deteriorate. Absolutely. Do you remember the cartoon Mr. Magoo?
Yeah.
That's me.
Mr. Magoo, you're driving around barely squinting over the steering wheel.
No, but I have proper glasses. So, but without glasses, I'm Mr. Magoo.
Okay, and how far would you go? Because we had a motoring journalist on earlier in the show, and I floated the idea that maybe there's an argument to say that the older you get, it should not be about regularly having an eye test. It should be about actually retaking your driving test, which would really sort things out. Would that be fair, do you think? You don't like the idea?
I'm against that. No. I hate that idea, in fact. That scares me. I hate that idea. Because you have to. No, it's too hard.
It's too hard. So if you had to take your driving test tomorrow, Cindy, you're telling me you're going to fail, right?
No. I'm going to pass it, but you have to over-exaggerate, like when you're turning your head. You have to, in order to pass the test here in America, you have to really rubberneck, like really great. Like you have to turn around practically all the way in the car.
It's a great call. Cindy, pleasure to talk to you here on Talk. Thank you. 0344 499 1000 for your call. I've got room for a few more between now and 1 a.m. You can WhatsApp us to that number, voice note us as well. Your text number, or rather your messages on the text, come into 87222. Start your message with the word talk. This is Kaz, who says, I don't drive anymore, but it'll be boy racers and cyclists for me. Haven't we done well to get 2 hours and 40 minutes into this show and talk about menaces on the road, and only now has someone mentioned cyclists. Cheers for that, Kaz. This is Stephen Enfield Town, who says the worst drivers by far in London are independent transit-style truck recovery drivers. Hang on a second. Independent transit-style truck recovery drivers, especially when they have a car on the back on the North Circular. It was horrendous with them on the outside lane. Thank God there are average speed cameras everywhere now to slow them down. That's interesting. It sounds like, Steve, you have a bitter experience that you've endured. What was bad about it? I think I can visualise the truck you're talking about, where they've got like the car on the back tied down, I suspect. Were they just going at quite a pace that the car was bouncing around? I suspect that's what you mean. Steve, thank you for your message. Elsewhere, who's this? Jamie, who says, kind things, Jamie. Nice to know you're listening, but I do think you might need a hearing aid, says Jamie from Bradford. As in 10 minutes, I've been listening. You've asked 3 people to repeat what they very clearly said the first time they said it. Well, I didn't hear it, Jamie. I'm not here to waste my time or your time, but I asked people to repeat it because I want to hear what they said properly before I respond to what they said. Though I take your point, and it's good to know you're listening. And this is Lucy, who's in Blackburn. Taxi drivers are the absolute worst drivers here in Blackburn, says Lucy. Well, there's a can of worms that we just opened up with 20 minutes left. I've experienced great taxi drivers and very poor taxi drivers. Respond to Lucy in Blackburn with her view that taxi drivers are the absolute worst drivers. She's in Blackburn. 87222 is the text number. Start your message with the word talk. 0344 499 1000 is our number for calls, WhatsApps and voice notes. I'm Duncan Barkes and this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barkes and this is Talk. I'm here through until 1 a.m. looking ahead to later on Tuesday. Kevin O'Sullivan here at 6 in the morning with Morning Glory. Alex Phillips here from 10 a.m. The fabulous Petrie Hoskin here between 1 and 4 in the afternoon. Nick Dubois, who's here between 4 and 7 p.m. Johnny Gould tomorrow evening, and I'm back here at 10 o'clock Tuesday night for more of the same. Let's get more of your calls on the air. 0344 499 1000. This one is in Basingstoke. Kevin, hello.
Can you repeat that, Duncan?
What?
No, I'm only joking. Because somebody said that you asked them to repeat it, so I thought I'd ask you.
Repeat what?
No, you read a message out and said, somebody said, are you hard of hearing?
Oh, I see. Yeah. No, you're coming through remarkably clear. I mean, you sound remarkably lucent and coherent. I can't necessarily say it about other contributors, but you're bang on the money. What would you like to say, Kev?
Well, Reform and the Tories can't really come together because, well, for one thing, Reform are the most popular party in the country, but they're also the most disliked party in the country.
Oh, that's an interesting comment. Give us a bit more on that.
Well, 74% of Reform voters said they would never vote for the Conservatives.
Yeah, they don't like the Tories, do they?
No, they don't like the Tories. And I think it was... and the other way around, it was 47% of Conservative voters said they wouldn't vote for Reform.
Yeah.
So they don't like each other. So they can't really come together.
That's a really interesting point because whilst, look, I know I've been knocking around media and politics for a long, long time, all right? And power is a really, I mean, you know, the idea of getting into Downing Street, getting into government in some form is a really powerful aphrodisiac, okay, for any politician. So you could find yourself in a situation where you've got Big Nige, that's Nigel Farage, you know, thinking I could do a deal with the Conservatives if it meant I get a bit of power and Reform make part or become part of a future government. The same with Kemi Badenoch, all right? And particularly it's quite powerful if you're of the view where you do anything to stop Labour having a second term in government, okay? So you could have the leaders and even some of their closest allies going, we should do a deal for the sake of the country. However, what you brilliantly put your finger on, Kevin, is there will be a lot of activists and a lot of supporters who couldn't think of anything worse.
Well, no, I mean, and Reform, I think it was June they hit their highest point at like 34%. Now they've come down to about 27%. So, you know, they've hit their peak too early. They seem to be on the way down.
Oh, you think so? So you think they've had their peak?
Well, they have. They have had their peak. They're going down at the moment.
Yeah, I know, but no disrespect, mate. They could go back up and they could have a peak, a bigger peak.
Well, they could, but another opinion poll said they was at, say, 30%, and then they said there was only like 1 percentage point that people said that they would consider voting for him. There was only like 1% more people that would have voted for him when they was at their highest point. So it's unlikely that they're going to go up much more than they are at the moment. And they don't seem to be doing too well with their local. You look at their local councils. I mean.
Well, that's an interesting point, and you're right to make that point. So, you know, they got control of 10 to a dozen councils back in May of this year. Kent County Council is often called the flagship Reform UK Council, but they got control of Durham as well, and Lancashire and stuff. And there has been numerous stories written, it's fair to say, by hostile press, not necessarily people who could be warm to Reform, saying that so far it's been a bit of a dog's dinner. So you're right to make that point. At what point do we write off Reform UK's ability to run local councils? Because at the moment it's only 6 months in. You know, is that too early? I think that's a fair point and maybe a debate for another time. But what I'm also interested in, and I've heard various political pollsters talk about this over the last 2 to 3 months, when they talk about Reform's rise in the polls, there are some pollsters who just go, what we're not taking into account here, because we simply do not know, is the amount of people who would never say to a polling company, I'm going to vote Reform. They're like shy reformers, like in the past we've had shy Tory voters, because people are a bit reluctant to admit it. Do you think there's any argument behind that actually there are some people, when asked how they'd vote, would vote Reform, but they're not going to tell a pollster how they're going to vote at the ballot box?
Well, maybe there is some point in that, but the thing is that in the last election there was tactical voting to keep, to keep the Tories out. I think in the next election there will be tactical voting, where people would vote for whichever party in their area, which is more likely to keep Reform out, because they are so disliked.
So you could see, actually, and I think you're right with the tactical voting, you could see people maybe who in a certain constituency might find themselves voting Conservative if it meant Reform not getting in.
Well, yeah, I mean, where I am, I would either vote, I mean, I really do not like the Conservatives, but I'd rather vote for the Tories than Nigel Farage, because I think he would be I mean, they're 5 MPs, they're all Conservatives, aren't they? And I mean, Nigel Farage he would just copy Donald Trump. And you can see the disaster it would be here. And the Conservatives know that. The Conservatives know if Reform came in, they would make such a mess of it. If they joined up with them, they wouldn't want to be a part of that.
That's interesting. So you think so that almost takes us back to the local council victories, that maybe if you're a Conservative strategist, and I know a few of them, what you might do if you wanted an attack line against Reform UK in about a year and a half's time, you start running the line, which is you couldn't even run a local council. How on earth can you be trusted to run the country?
Well, yeah, that is true, but the thing that Nigel's got in his favour, most of the media in this country is right-wing, and most of the papers...
Well, hang on a second. I don't know if that's true, mate. I don't want to fall out with you, but I mean, you know, the BBC is hardly right-wing, is it? And that's a lion's share of media, sadly.
The BBC is supposed to be in the middle. You're on the right, and you probably say it's more left wing, and I say vice versa. But it is more. It's not like the Express, is it? Or sorry, it's not like the Daily Mail or the Mirror, or they are. You know what side they're on, but most of the papers are right wing, and most papers that people buy.
I don't know if they're right wing. I think they're right of centre. I don't necessarily think they're right wing.
The thing is, politics is all gone further to the right, hasn't it? I mean, Nigel's done. I mean, he doesn't really need to be in power. He's getting his own way anyway, because politics has gone to the right, and that's what he wants. And the Green Party might do the opposite. The Green Party might start pushing politics further to the left.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see the effect that the Green Party may have on the Labour Party. Kevin, pleasure to talk to you. 0344 499 1000 is our number here at Talk. Georgina, hello.
Good morning, Duncan. Lovely to talk to you, and a very happy Christmas to you.
That's very kind of you. Same to you. What have you got planned? Anything exciting?
Well, just a quiet Christmas this year, having family. I'm just cooking bread at the moment and doing some mince pies. So
well, you're baking your own mince pies?
Yes, I know, my bread and mince pies. So the house smells beautiful at the moment. It's very Christmassy.
I bet it does. Yeah. What would you like to say?
Right, well, everyone's got their own opinion on Nigel and reform, and they've got their own opinion on the Conservatives and Kemi. I'm going to say what I've got to say, give you my opinion, and then I'm going to get out of your hair. OK, so Nigel Farage will not need a coalition with the Tories, despite what the latest polls are saying. It's the Tories, Duncan, that need reform to keep them in a job. But we don't want MPs jumping from a moribund party, their sinking ship, so to speak, onto the great ship reform, as this will just make reform Conservative 2.0.
Well, let me ask you to stop there, because I hear this criticism a lot, and I get it completely. I know of people who believe that Reform UK under Nigel Farage is the big hope for the future of this country. All right, that's what they tell me. And they're getting increasingly depressed by the number of Conservatives who have joined Reform, who they consider to be part of the failing, certainly the last few years, of the 14 years of the Conservative government. So I was in Birmingham for the Reform conference. I was hosting a panel there.
Well, yes.
You were there as well?
I was there as well, my darling, yes. I was on the
were you drinking in the bars at 10:30 in the morning, which is what I witnessed?
No, I don't drink, Duncan. I don't drink alcohol.
OK, so I was there, and do you remember Nadine Dorries was unveiled as someone who had defected to Reform? Nadine Dorries, big friend of Boris Johnson, former Culture Secretary, and there were people who were at the conference, the Reform conference, who were kind of muttering away, just going, I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, why do we want her? And I found myself thinking, Reform UK's got to be really careful with this, because if you end up with too many ex-Tory MPs joining the party, and I'm going to use this phrase again because I quite like it, you do end up becoming a care home for failed Conservative MPs, don't you?
Yes, but each one of those MPs have got something useful to bring to the table, and that's what Nigel is looking for. He doesn't want any old person, and he needs people who are seasoned and bring something viable to the table, and that's what he's doing. I mean, God bless her, I do like...
So just for clarity purposes, what does Nadine Dorries bring to the table in your view?
Experience
of being a cabinet minister?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, well, you know, you need experienced, seasoned MPs. You don't want everyone to be a greenhorn. Not everyone's been an MP in the Houses of Parliament, you know. We've got a lot of youngsters in Reform UK, and we need people who are there as role models to teach.
I get the argument completely, but at what point, and you used the phrase a few moments ago, you don't want Reform to become the Conservative Party version 2.0.
Well, yes, but we don't want everyone. We don't want everyone jumping off the ship.
Well, where do you draw the line then?
Now.
So no more Tory defectors?
No more, not at all. I mean, I was going to say about Kemi, you know, she's only just started to find her feet, Duncan, where political party leadership's concerned. We've watched her closely for the past 13 months, and she was lacking fight or fire in her belly. Being the leader means you should already be seasoned, know your job, know how to get the gotchas, know how to trip up your opposition. Goodness knows the Labour Party gave her ample enough opportunity to get Keir Starmer on the road.
So hang on, you're talking about Kemi?
Yes.
So if I've understood you correctly, it's not because I'm mishearing you, I just want to make sure I understand the point correctly. People should walk into the leader's job already capable of doing the job.
They should have experience and have...
Well, how do you get that experience unless you've been leader of another political party? It doesn't work.
It's a case of being leader. It's a case of being the best there is. And I'm sorry, if Kemi was the best there was within that party, then, I mean, I was a Conservative for over 45 years.
All right, tell me in the last few minutes of our chat, what made you flip?
I don't like being lied to.
You don't like being lied to? And who lied to you about what?
Boris Johnson with the COVID inquiry, or all this COVID nonsense, stay at home and they're off having parties and goodness knows what else.
Right.
That really boiled my blood. Can I just finish what I wanted to say before you've got to go to a break?
Yes.
Right, OK. We shouldn't have had to wait 13 months for Kemi to get over her learning curve, which is what she's done. She should have already been able to come out of a corner and give Labour the fight for its life. As for Tory and a Reform coalition, there can only be one captain on the ship, and Nigel's not going to have any other captain who will want to put their oar in Reform's policies. He knows exactly how he wants his ship to be run. He knows who he wants to help him with its smooth running, and he's getting the right people in place for when he becomes Prime Minister, and by gosh, he will. Both the Labour and Conservative Party have been waiting for a political storm. They know that it's on the horizon. Nigel, however, isn't worried about the storm because Nigel and Reform are the storm, Duncan.
They are the storm.
Absolutely.
And can they remain the storm for another potential 3 years?
It's not going to be that long. I think if you think it's going to go another 3 years, I think that's a misapprehension.
Well, it's interesting because Farage has gone on the record, and you know, this man is good at political predictions, to say that he believes there'll be a general election in 2027. OK, that's what he said. That's what I know for a fact.
Well, I think he's right.
That's what